Hello, welcome everybody to the best tournament to kick off the last quarter of 2023 Royale Masters, the classic, the OG, the most important edition. I'm Rich Slayton, that's Andrew Guy, and we're here to bring you this phenomenal bracket as players earn points, earn money, and earn a shot at the overall finals for this phenomenal competition.
Yeah, I feel like the coolest thing about all of what you just said is how important Royale Masters really is in the grand scape of the Clash Royale competitive universe. The biggest names show up, and it's right before World Finals. They want that cash, they want to get that practice in, and they want to face off against the other best in the world for practice. So let's talk about the format, right? Royale Masters, why do Rich and Andrew love it so much? Why are you going to love it? Well, because in our opinion, like he said, it's the best way to end the year when you're talking about competitive Clash. So where are we? We're in our second Open Qualifier. It's a two-day event. We are in day 2, 16 players, single elimination bracket. But of course, as you get to the very, very end, we're going to make it a best of 5. That's right. It's going to be best of 3 all the way through best of 5 for our finals. And then, of course, there is a wild card open. So there's the Open Qualifiers, there's the wild card open, and that gets you all the way to playoffs next month. And there is a huge prize there. But first, all elimination matches in that playoff will be best of 5 like our finals here today. And it will also be double elimination because we all know how you guys feel about having single elimination in playoffs, Rich. We learned that in 2018, 2019, 2020. People were very opinionated, I should say.
Yeah, double elim is what it's all about, but more importantly, what's all about here at Royale Masters is a slight tweak to the dual format you know from Clash Royale League. In Clash Royale League, dual format is, hey, you bring in 4 decks, you can't use any deck twice. That's not the same thing here. In this case, for the dual format in Royale Masters, you lose a deck that you win with. So if you play game number 1 and you win, those 8 cards are out, but your opponent can repeat those cards. A huge difference from our standard dual format. And what's nice about this, as we'll see with the final today, and as Andrew said, our playoffs later, it allows for BO5s with a dual format, and it's so much fun. So a little tweak that makes us have the ability to go for a full 5 games, and I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, and we got that full 5 just last week. Clown and Mo Light went the distance. Hopefully we'll get it again today, but let's talk about the money, right? There's a lot of money up for grabs, a lot of money in the playoffs, and a lot of money every single time we do these open qualifiers. $6,000 to every single open qualifier. That means if you get first place, you can walk away with $2,400. And as Rich mentioned just a little bit ago, those points down below. Even if you don't win, you want to get those points so that maybe, just maybe, you can be there for the finals. And the finals prize pool, it's a little bit bigger than $6,000. You can see right there, it's a $30,000 prize pool overall for traditional Royale Masters. So maybe you can do the math at home. And if you can't, well, let me tell you, it's a little bit more than that. It's a lot of money to end the year on. And of course, Royale Masters always shows up with that money. But Rich, the bracket that we have here today, it's a pretty good one. Just like last week's bracket, we got a lot of big players out there. We, of course, have Mohamed Light once again. I saw that him and Jebas went 10-0 throughout qualifiers. I think they did the exact same thing last week, but they were not able to climb that mountain at the end of the day. Other huge names here as well, man.
Yeah, I think that, you talk about Mo, he's certainly got a chip on his shoulder from last week, but look at some of the other guys in here, as you said. Morton, who will be at World Finals on the same side as Mo, they could meet very, very early in that second round matchup. Wallace and Sandbox, a round of 6 matchup. Matea in there, aka Boji Hertz, Ta in there, Ali. Lots of fun players if you know the Clash Royale competitive scene.
Yeah, I mean, and this is really it. I mean, I think one of the biggest things with Morton, and, we've talked about him for over half a decade now, one of my favorite players, one of your favorite players and personalities. Is he in fighting form? I mean, a lot of people weren't even sure about last year. It seemed like Morton was maybe grinding a little bit more in 2022. We saw the great success he had getting second place at Worlds. This year was really different. It almost felt like he didn't show up in monthly finals. I know that he did, but it didn't feel like he was there as often or maybe striking as hard. I'm so curious to see how he does here today in a competition, in a little bit of a different format. It's not in-game duels, so he can take time in between matches. We all know that Morton is pretty good at picking decks now. I just want to see where he's at before we actually get to Finland.
Well, I think there's one word that describes Morton from top to bottom in everything he does, and that's professional. professional.
Okay, there it is. Yeah.
Right? He's been so dedicated and so talented and so focused since the beginning of CRL. Then you add in his successful English channel for Clash Royale, his successful German channel for Clash Royale. The dude works so hard, and I expect nothing less than a top-tier Morten when we do get to Helsinki. And this is just part of that getting in shape, getting those warm-ups ready, and getting those reps in before we get there.
That's such a great point that you make. I mean, regardless of whether he's grinding practices with the best players in the world, he's still grinding at the highest level in the world all day, every day. So it is always hard to count him out. I really love that you make that point. The other point that we forgot to make is that when you looked at that bracket, we're only going to see one match in that round of 16. We are going to watch Wallace versus Sandbox. Be a lot of fun. They were both at World Finals last year. Unfortunately, this year we will be just getting Wallace. Sandbox is going to take 1 year off. Maybe we'll see if we get him back in 2024. And then from that point on, we will be watching every single match. Right now, we're just waiting for the players to get ready. So why don't you get ready for the next qualifier? Go and follow Royal Masters on Twitter, in the Discord. The Discord is the best place to go. Tasty Bacon and Dawson, they are keeping you guys updated on all the information. And honestly, like yesterday and last week, Rich, I'm sure you see it too, because you're always in Discord. When there's qualifiers going, they let you know exactly what group, when it starts, when it ends, every single time, so that you guys don't get lost in maybe the confusion of your very first tournament, which this could be. That's the coolest thing about Royal Masters, is it's the era anyone can join in. So go follow those channels and subscribe here on the YouTube.
And of course, if you don't know where to find that Discord link, it is in the YouTube description below. So discord.gg/RoyaleMSTRS. But it's in there for the link so you can get ahead, because this is, of course, your opportunity. Like many opportunities, one of the best parts of the Clash Royale esports ecosystem is it's not a closed system. It's a generally open system. Whether you're talking about CRL, where if you make the top 1,000 at ranked end of the year, you are in for the qualifiers for that month. Same thing here. There's open opportunities for everybody. So that's why we see some of the interesting matchups we have here, right? We don't just have top-tier pros. We have a little bit of a mix. Now, most of these players are pretty well established competitive players, but you have a couple of players from outside the core of the scene. Ali in his first round matchup up against Akaza, a guy that we have not seen very much of, if at all, here in some of the higher level stuff. So there's opportunities. We've seen people pop off and make big names for themselves, and of course get a piece of that prize pool.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that's so great about Royal Masters, is that you are getting such high-level competition, and it really does reflect what it feels like playing on, in CRL, other than on the live stage, I should say, is that you really can make a name for yourself here. I mean, literally, we were just watching last week, and then we get to King of the Hill on Wednesday, and someone asked, like, who do you think is the biggest up-and-coming player? And just because of how well Clown performed last weekend against Mohamed Light, the things that you had to say about his performance earlier in the year in the summer, the deck picking, the fact that he was also working with Jebez, there's so many pieces of that puzzle that all come together. He's got the skill, he's got a great coach, and apparently he has the maturity to keep going toe-to-toe in a best of 5 against the best in the world. Just like that, it's like, boom, he's on my radar, and he's like really sending that radar ting off.
Yeah, I mean, he's been dangerous all year and was certainly threatening for a chance at World Finals this year as well. Finished just a couple of places out of that top 7. So just a couple of things could have gone right. We talked about this last week, right? 5 more wins, and he's in that World Finals berth. So it's kind of crazy that way. And I do want to take a look. Let's see if we can make a quick look while we're waiting. And the players are getting ready. We can't start the game until they start playing, folks. But let's take a look at the bracket and kind of talk about the path that some of these players have to get where they're going. I believe that hopefully the booth can pick that up for us. Yes, here we go. Let's just take a look at the bracket, talk about the path, because we kind of have 4 quadrants to make it to that semifinals. So starting with the most exciting one, Andrew, bottom left here part of the bracket.
Yeah.
Maybe the most stacked here, because you not only have Mohamed Light and Morten, last year's #1 and #2, but Agony King, the Sparky player, and Broken in here, and I guess we are ready to go ahead and jump into Wallace and Sandbox. But you look about these matchups, we'll talk about some of these paths to victory in a little bit. It's not easy.
No, and another person on that same side of the bracket is trainer Adnan, who has shown up in a lot of the competitions throughout this year and has impressed in almost every single one of them. So this is a great way to start our day here at Royal Masters. Wallace top of your screen, Sandbox at the bottom, and 2 of my favorite cards are showing up a lot more these days in the Skeleton King and, of course, the Mortar. There's all these interesting Mortar spam decks. Mo made a video on one. There's 3 or 4 different versions out there with recruits, with Knights, with Skeleton Dragons, with Goblin Gangs. So we'll see which version Sandbox wants to bring here. And then Wallace, you know, Rich, I don't know if you saw this also, but at the top of the UC leaderboards, we are seeing Hog EQ in different forms be the #1 deck again, but it's coupled with Tesla now, as opposed to the traditional cannon or bomb tower. So we'll see if that shows up at all today.
Well, people are getting ready for the bomb tower nerf incoming. So they're preparing for the shift that's happening. And maybe as they're doing that, they're discovering how good Tesla is. We have been seeing a little bit more in the air, right? We've been seeing a little bit more Balloon. We've been seeing a little bit more Lava Hound. So the Tesla change could also reflect some of that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot more for sure. I've seen, I mean, we were just talking about how, you know, the season ends here today. I did a little push last night, and it's shocking how much I ran into in the skies. That is a great fireball there for Sandbox, and you understand why Wallace did it, but I think if you know this deck that Sandbox is running, which is fair that it's kind of newer for Wallace and his defense, I would have loved to see the pigs split at the middle there, get 2 in front of the Firecracker, 2 to the opposite lane.
And somehow avoid Skeleton Dragon damage there on the left-hand side. Still lead for Sandbox, holding on pretty nicely by about 280 HP. And Pig's high fireball gonna miss 1, and will that be enough to get through for at least a couple of pokes here? The Goblin Gang gets mostly taken down by the log, but no big breakthrough for Wallace.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love what Wallace is doing in terms of orchestrating his offensive pushes here, and maybe this is the idea that he can beat the cycle. He had a nice prelog on that Goblin Gang, Rich, like you were calling out. Didn't get really anything out of it, but otherwise in that offensive push, I just felt like he gave too much mortar value, too much fireball value, and now hopefully he'll maybe pump the brakes a little bit and put together better pushes, but at the same time, as I say all this, he is in the lead.
Yeah, I am curious about the diving that lane. I mean, when you are facing against the Goblin Gang, the Dark Goblin, the Recruits, and the Skeleton Dragons, the ability for them to split lane, and then you still pull everything to the middle with that mortar, you know, maybe he's thinking it's better to pound one lane rather than try to split that damage and also give his opponent the ability to stretch him a little bit thin.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. The deck on the bottom of the screen really does succeed by being able to create dual lane pressure. You start to make your opponent make mistakes, so maybe Wallace is just thinking, let's not give him the opportunity to make me start making mistakes. So we see some dual lane pressure coming in now, though, and did pretty good success. Firecracker gets a shot across the board on that left-hand weaker tower, and then still gets some damage in on the right. 1907, 1316. This deck that Sandbox is running gets really scary, though, here late game.
And that's going to be a really nice couple of Skeleton King hits to suddenly get this thing back very, very close. 100 HP separating these two. And Wallace going back into the weak side lane here and really hoping to get some Evo Firecracker chip, but good high Dart Goblin stops that from happening. Can he protect enough? Skelly King picks up. Sandbox avoids most of the damage, but the lead does swing back a little heavily to Wallace.
Yeah, that could have gotten really, really ugly there. Sandbox does, I feel like, almost get away with one. The high Dark Goblin, I think, was for a little bit of pressure. It ends up working out in his favor, like you said, to catch that Firecracker. But then I think that's just 3 Elixir and a lot of DPS he would have liked somewhere else on the board. The other part is that these Inferno Towers are really causing havoc for Sandbox. He's having a really hard time breaking through and getting the Dark Goblins on top of them.
It's fascinating because, and look at the damage coming in. This is the problem with that, with using that Inferno Tower, is this is a big swarmy deck, and that's a GG, that's a well played. Sandbox overwhelms, gets right past those Inferno Towers and takes game number 1.
Yeah, I mean, that deck, it's crazy when you get into double Elixir, or even if you're in single Elixir and you overcommit, what those Royal Recruits Evo can really do in terms of creating pressure and making you make mistakes, right? You saw the forced Earthquake out on defense a couple cycles ago, and I think that's when Sandbox kind of started to see, all right, Wallace is starting to feel like he's getting a little uncomfortable. Let's just keep turning up the pressure as the Elixir starts to flow a little more quickly. And it was just the overwhelm. I mean, that's literally all it is you just get to overwhelm. You start to bait out those logs by putting Dark Goblins behind Recruits, and then all of a sudden you're able to get that Skeleton King in with a lot more pressure with the Goblin Gang behind, and of course the Skeleton King ability. So it makes sense why I love that deck. You got Mortar, you got bait aspects, and it is really tough to keep up with.
Yeah, and you know, we start talking about game number 2 here. I wonder if Wallace has the idea of maybe going back to a similar deck construction as Fireball is out, Mortar is out, some good splash damage is out. So the best spell for going up against this deck, maybe he goes even more deep into a Fireball bait deck now that we're going into Game 2 and Fireball is out for Sandbox. Only remember, Wallace can repeat these cards. Sandbox cannot. If I'm Sandbox, I'm probably running something with Bomb Tower.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think if you are the loser of that game and you look at what was just used, the Goblin Gang, the Skeleton King, like you said, the Fireball, all that stuff, so good. Double down on that Fireball bait, or figure out a way to really pick it apart that isn't just straight up Fireball bait. But I really do agree, and we saw that last time. We see this every time with traditional Royale Masters. Sometimes going right back to the well isn't the best way to go, but if you're going back to the well, it's not an ego thing, it's not like a comfort thing, and it's really picking apart what was just used, it really does seem to succeed. It just happens every single time. Just make it a little easier on it. And then the same conversation, Rich, you know, last weekend we talked about, like, why aren't you taking advantage? If log's out, just at least get something in there that's baity, or if arrows are out, maybe go to the skies. Whatever it is, I think it's really important to utilize the fact that you can go back to the well on certain cards.
Hey, maybe even go to the Remy Eli deck. Get one last run with it before it gets nerfed into the ground. I think in 24 hours, where you're about to Evo Knight's about to go down, Magic Archer's about to go down, Bomb Tower's about to go down. And here we go. Sandbox going for Hog, and Wallace going Barbs, and they will evolve later in the game, but maybe going to some sort of Fireball bait here.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what the general public's opinion is on the top 3 Evos. It felt like it was, you know, Barbs for the longest time, then it felt like it was Knight, and then it felt like it was Knight or Barbs. It felt like recruits were like an immediate 3rd, maybe even 4th place, but now after I feel like more time has gone on, I'd just be curious to see where the best players in the world rate the recruits, because they seem to be showing up a lot. I'd probably still give the edge to Knight, though. And here you go, Rich. Great call there on the Magic Archer. Not the exact same as the Remy Eli deck. We're going to go for a version of Bridge Spam, Overwhelm, got the Heal Spirit in there, and of course the Magic Archer piercing damage, the 3-card cycle with the AQ. It's a fun deck. I'm not great with it, though.
Yeah, and Bridge Spam is such an interesting, very specific type of gameplay, because for a lot of people, they're like, well, it's Bridge Spam. Just spam a lot of spammy spam. And really, Bridge Spam is actually a very defensive deck that is all about timing that overwhelm, timing when you overload at the bridge and create that big downhill push, that big moment. So let's see how well Wallace kind of holds back and tries to create opportunities for elixir advantages, and when he chooses to win a big bridge fight against a deck that really isn't about bridge fights.
No, I mean, I think especially if you add in the arrows to this combination, or this conversation, I should say, and the fact that Sandbox has those guards, it's going to be a pretty tough out here. I mean, you got the Bomb Tower as kind of your second tank, but you see right there, you have to use your Knight in certain situations. If we're in double elixir right now, Wallace pulls the trigger on the arrows and gets those guards off the board, and I think this is all stuff that Sandbox is going to have to think about moving forward, and I think it gets pretty scary.
This is so hard for Wallace to defend these Hogs, though. He has no his only real Hog defense is the Barbs, and he cannot keep up with us. Even with this slightly heavier variation of Hog Cycle, he really can't keep up with this in single and double, and you saw really good opportunistic exploitation of that by Sandbox.
And Wallace does exactly what I think you need to do here. You look at all the things that you just broke down, Rich, and you go, what's my out? How do I fix this? I'll tell you, it's a 3-card cycle. Get your AQ on the board. She can't get spelled off the board. Get her on the board in the back so that you can have a 3-card cycle to get back around to Barbs. I think that's probably the best way to go while we're hanging out here in double elixir. You can still create pressure like we're seeing right there with the Magic Archer plus the Battle Ram, but that 3-card cycle is imperative in keeping up with the Hog.
Yeah, he's gotta keep that 3-card cycle up, has to make sure that if he doesn't have Barbs, he has to have enough elixir to completely overwhelm those Hog Riders and put a ton of damage on them. And the last thing is he needs to do a little better job of protecting these Magic Archers. The Magic Archer so far has just been getting a little bit of value, but not enough to justify the 4 elixir. And here we go. This is where you start getting something, but not getting the lineup. He's going to get a couple of shots here, but Sandbox now with a good opportunity. Evolved Knight plus Musketeer on one side. Hog goes the opposite way. There's your Evolved Barbarians.
Yeah, and that's just a great pull with the Ice Spirit there to get on top of whatever defensive unit was going to come down on top of the Musketeer. Sandbox reading Wallace like a book right now, back around to Bomb Tower. Really, really well played. And again, man, you're so correct. The Magic Archers, the whole point of having the Magic Archer and the Archer Queen and the Barbarians is you're looking at spell bait, right? And the fact that the Magic Archer and the AQs aren't really making Sandbox uncomfortable right now is something that Wallace needs to figure out. How do I get that on the board? How do I get more of these on the field so that it makes it so that Sandbox is having a hard time with just Earthquake to clean up my Magic Archer or my Archer Queen?
Magic Archer working on the bomb tower here in the middle. And look at the log plus EQ combination just to make sure it's not involved in the conversation. But here's a good Magic Archer lineup that is suddenly going to make this into a real close battle with 30 seconds left. But again, you have to get on tower and you're up against log plus Earthquake. So Wallace needs to find a breakthrough here. I'm not sure if he can do it.
Yeah, the Evo Barbs right there, I understand the idea, but I don't know if that's 100% the best way to go. The fact that he's able to get all the way back around and that Sandbox hasn't felt the urge to go on the offensive until now was really, really disciplined by Sandbox. There could have been a moment there where he decided to send a hog opposite lane to maybe bait out defensive Elixir. It would have been easier for Wallace to clean that up and then keep pressure on the right. I think Sandbox would have wanted that 4 Elixir on the hog more for defense. Either way, he does a great job, shows great patience, takes that right-hand lane only by 189. That's a clean 2-0 sweep.
That's a really, really phenomenal first-round performance here by Sandbox, who did a great job in deck picking in game number 2, right? I said Bomb Tower probably needs to be in here now that Mortar and Fireball are both out. He made the pick, and then Wallace with a really interesting choice here. You know, you see that Log is still available, and that leaves Hog as a really likely option, and having no building to pull that Hog just creates a little bit of danger.
Love this graphic. Just had to give a big thumbs up to the booth. I always love seeing Royale API graphics on any broadcast. They do the best job out there. Big shout out to both SML and Alpi. This is a very great thing to pull because you look at the matchup here, you look at the matchup conversation. Rich, you mentioned it, I mentioned it. When you look at the Battle Ram, the Archer Queen, the Magic Archer, and the Barbs, you think about like a big spell sometimes. If you're really getting overwhelmed, well, at least a big spell can take care of all those cards, or at least slow those 4 cards down. There is no big spell here. What you have is EQ plus log to get on top of those Magic Archers, right? It just felt like those Magic Archers and those Archer Queens were not enough of a nuisance. Even if it's just, I mean, obviously you can't have 2 Archer Queens on the board, but if you have a 3-card cycle, then you can have a couple Magic Archers on the board, 1 in each lane. Having a Magic Archer on the board in the weaker of the 2 lanes, if it's your second Magic Archer down, is an okay thing. But I understand, you know, not wanting to give too much spell value. I just think that there was a big miss there for Wallace. You even see there in the numbers that he actually had the matchup advantage as well.
Yeah, and the hard part there, he wasn't really doing a good job of protecting the Magic Archer. He didn't know. Every time he wanted to protect the Magic Archer, he had to spend more and put himself in a position where the Hog could pressure the opposite lane with very little opportunity to defend against it, right? So he put himself in that position, got down early in single Elixir, where he couldn't defend the Magic Archer and defend against the Hog Rider in a way that would turn into a potential counter push. So that's a really good opportunity, a good opportunistic play by Sandbox to get the damage before it got too dangerous for him late in game. And at that point, you're playing with Log and Earthquake, your opponent is just playing arrows. He's not going to catch up.
And the other thing that you can do in terms of cycle, if you don't want to play the AQ yet, maybe there's a reason that it feels like you might need the Archer Queen, you might need that damage in a moment, you can start cycling those Bandits or Royal Ghosts to the weaker of your 2 lanes, right? Because it's always just a little bit harder to pull the trigger on a Hog if you see a Royal Ghost working down the lane, or you see a pre-cycled Bandit working down. I don't know if that's the reason why Wallace struggled more. I think it's more about the fact that he didn't take advantage of a medium spell as opposed to a big spell when he had all those annoying cards. But either way, He's the one going to World Finals. Sandbox is the one going to the second round here at Royale Masters. I'm not sure if we could take a look at the bracket to get an update on where the other players are at. It looks like Tasty was ready to go with that. Big shout out to him. Muhammad Light was able to survive. Broken actually takes down Morton 2-1. So already a couple upsets here in round number 1. Ali falls to Akaza. Rich, we don't really know much about Akaza, but apparently they were able to beat Ali. It looks like Tico falls to Doodoo, which again, probably a bit of an upset there. I know Tico. I don't really know the aforementioned player. And then at the bottom of the screen, you know, Ta versus Kurim. We didn't get to talk much about Ta, but able to make it through the first round.
Yeah, and Matea, a.k.a. Boziji Hurt. I don't know how to pronounce that thing. It's Matea. Your name's Matea. He loses to Curium. And, yeah, so a couple small upsets here. Nothing super insane. I would love to go back, and maybe I will go back, take a look at the decks from Morton in his matchup against Broken. But Broken's certainly a capable player, and that's the thing about duel mode, right? You pick right a couple of times, and it only takes 2 wins.
All right, Rich, I'm going to tell you right now because you called, I responded. So Morton in game number 1, he goes Evo Knight with Archer Queen, Hog EQ, and he runs into Royal Recruits, Evolved Royal Recruits with Bomb Tower, Wall Breakers, you know, the kind of version of the Wall Breakers spam deck. And then in game number 2, Morton goes Evo Knight with Drill and Magic Archer, and he goes up against Air, which is really tough when you only have Magic Archer and Bomb Tower and NATO to deal with that. So I think it's a bit of a matchup conversation in game number 2. You look at the numbers there, it's a 60-40 with 7 cards. It's a 50-50 with all matching 8, but there's only 4 to use there, so that's not really, I think, a fair sample size. And then also in game number 1, you look at Morton, he has a bad matchup. It's, high 50s to low 40s matchup there, so it's not maybe as bad as game number 2, but again, just kind of getting caught with the rough matchups is the goated one in Germany.
Well, let's go to our next matchup. It's going to be Mohamed Light versus Broken.
Yes.
So we'll see if Magic can strike twice, and can Broken go from taking out last year's number 2 World Finals finisher to last year's number 1 World Finals, the World Finals champion. And Broken is also from Germany, just like the guy he just beat, and played a little bit in CRL this year, was able to earn 100 points off of some okay performances in the Swiss. Almost made it into our final group stages with 7 wins in the Swiss bracket, almost making that 8-win threshold, get through to the next level. So Broken has competed a little bit, and here he is with a cool opportunity to go against, take out number 2, and then get a potential big win against the number 1 guy on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, what a better way to get your kind of momentum rolling for next year, if you will. Like you said, Broken, not going to be at World Finals this year, only got 100 points on the year in CRL, but it's a name that we've talked about a lot over the last couple of years, just kind of, on the fringes of getting to that S tier. I think he's probably what you'd call like an A or B caliber player right now in the competitive scene, but taking down Morton, like you said, is huge, and then going up against Mo, like you always say, Rich, out of the frying pan into the fire. Yeah. We'll see if he can hang. And I think also Mo is probably playing with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, because Clown did a very similar thing last week, where it was like going through heavy hitters on his way, just going from one to the next, getting from world finalists, then going to Muhammad Light in the finals, all of that. So I feel like no matter what, you got to go on one of these runs against some of the best in the world in these tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, that's the name of the game, right? And do you have the consistency? Anyone can win 1 best of 3. Can you win 2? Can you win 3? Can you win 4? This is a single elimination tournament, and that's your number, right? The round of 16, quarters, semis, finals. You got to win 4 best of 3s. You got to get 8 dubs, and 8 dubs against top-tier players. And keep in mind, if you get past Mo, look at who else is on that bracket as well you have to go through. Yeah. So this is about consistency, and that's, again, what separates Clash Royale mid from Clash Royale great.
Yeah, and it looks like Adnan was able to take that last, I think that was the final one still going in round number 1. He does take it 2-1, so excited to see where Adnan will go. He's going to face off against Akaza, like I said, one of the lesser-known players. CMG, Sandbox versus Doodoo, and then at the very bottom, Ta versus Kurim. We got to come up with a better name for this guy, for me, at least for my sake, as we go through this broadcast.
Kurim.
But right now, are just waiting on the players. For those wondering in the chat why we haven't started, well, you don't want to just see Rich and I play. We honestly can't play on this broadcast anyway, so we're waiting on the actual good players to get ready and set their decks. This is part of it, right? I mean, when you go to the CRL broadcast and you hear the pros talk about, I wish we had time to pick our decks in between matches and in between games, this is the other side of it, right? And it sounds like we are going to hop into games, which is why for CRL monthlies we do the in-game format, and here at Royale Masters, because it's a little bit of a different, you know, obviously you can reuse certain decks, it's going to take a little bit time for these players to figure things out. Mohamed Light, bottom of your screen against Broken at the top. We'll see who gets a better matchup here, because you always want a better, you always want a 60-40 matchup if you have to go up against Mohamed Light.
And Broken switching things up here, did not run Skeleton King at all in the previous matchup against Morton, so showing some depth in his deck choices. And Mohamed Light, no surprises here, going with a variation of minor wall breakers, and gonna have to get used to playing. Unless, look, let's dial it back for a second. We know that the West tends to overreact to nerfs. We've been there before. Yeah. So the big question is Magic Archer going to be dead, or is Magic Archer just going to be a little bit less powerful?
I think it'll do what it always does. I think you're correct in assuming that the West will overcorrect, especially because I think bats are going to get evolved and come out. I think that there's just there's a bit of, I don't want to say overlap, because, you know, I feel like people will jump on me for that. But I feel like with bats getting evolved and the fact that they would probably so easily take out a Magic Archer, especially if they have a bite, I wonder if the Magic Archer's one shot would kill an evolved bat if it has a bite that gave it some health. I think we see a Magic Archer just kind of disappear for a little bit, and then probably come back maybe when we get to World Finals. Maybe there'll be enough time between, you know, the bats coming out, the Magic Archer nerf, and the Bomb Tower nerf for people to re-correct like they do, Rich. But I don't know. I'm a little bummed. I do think that deck is pretty frustrating to play against, and I know it's been like overpopular for a while, but it's still a great deck, and I think it's only overpopular at the highest level.
I think that maybe the Evo Knight nerf and the Bomb Tower nerf would have been sufficient. Of course, there's some questions about the Bomb Tower nerf and what kind of, you know, be careful what you wish for, I guess, is when you take when the Bomb Tower becomes less popular, what will rise to fill in that void, and what will suddenly get stronger because it's not there to stop it, right? People talk about a NATO nerf a whole lot, but hey, a lot of players in the middle of the game, right? Not top tier players, but middle player game, say that Hog Rider is the most OP win condition in the world. Well, I think Hog Rider is perfectly balanced, but when you nerf NATO, you're releasing a whole lot more Hog Riders.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you talk about NATO nerf and the Bomb Tower nerf. Now Royal Piggies are going to be everywhere again. And, yeah, I don't know, man. And, like, the Lava Hound nerf. It's exactly what you're talking about. Those people in the middle of the ladder, which are obviously people, and they matter as well in terms of Clash Royale competitive, but I just don't know if they're the ones that should be making the decisions on balance, because, like, Lava getting nerfed just doesn't make sense to me, like, period. But I know why it happened because of the voting.
Well, and sometimes you see that a certain card, a certain win condition or something is having a lot of success, and we talk about the cascading effect of balance changes, and is it because that card is strong, or because supporting cards around it are strong, or because a card that was strong against the supporting cards got nerfed, so those supporting cards got strong, and now that win condition's inadvertently buffed, and around and around and around we go, just like the defenses of Broken right now trying to keep up with Mohamed Light's pressure.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the pressure from Mo is just breaking through on the left, on the right side. Like you said, Broken just feeling like he's just playing the keep-up game. And, Rich, that's why you and I love casting, and why, as fun as it might sound sometimes, being on the balanced team is it's a tough job. A lot of respect to those guys.
Yeah, it's a job I want nothing to do with. I'll be the talkie guy for a living.
So Mo doing a really good job. I mean, if you just see here, he keeps cycling the recruits in the back every single time that he gets an offensive push in. He gets the recruits down in the back again to kind of reset. He's always got the Bomb Tower there ready to go. He's been doing a great job of using his poisons defensively. As you can see right there, gets it in the perfect spot to help with the recruits and still get the Dark Goblin off the board. And the other thing is when that poison isn't able to take care of the Dark Goblin, the log has always been locked and loaded and ready to go. So Mo just doing Mo things right now. I think Broken really isn't even playing this poorly. It's just more about how well Mohamed Light is playing this.
Yeah, this is just, it's really hard for him, and he has the ability to kind of contend both lanes, but the Mortar here kind of isn't doing a lot, right? The Mortar is defending some, but when you're, I think that Mortar Miner kind of needs to be faster for a lot of matchups, and this is certainly one of them.
Yeah, this deck is so interesting that Broken's running at the top of your screen. I've been trying it out a little bit, and I'm finding myself in situations a lot like what he was in for that entire game, which is, you know, when you're playing against someone who's actually got it figured out, it's almost impossible to break through. I think with that deck, you really rely on someone making mistakes defensively, getting that overwhelm in one lane because they use the log inappropriately in the opposite lane, whatever it is. But when you're going up against someone like Mo, and obviously the situation with the log, with the bomb tower, and with the poison made this like a lot easier for him. But I do find that with that deck, it is really tough because exactly like you're talking about, it's tough to really know when to use the mortar. You end up having to use it a lot more defensively than you'd like because that Skeleton King, while he is great and the Miner are both great in terms of HP, you really want them to be on the other side of the board. You really want them to gain, you know, obviously the Miner gets behind a counter push or in front of a counter push, or the Skeleton King is able to stack souls on your side and still cross the bridge with a good amount of HP, and then you get to use that ability. I think the hardest thing with that deck is if your opponent plays patiently like Mo did and conservatively, it's really hard to break through a good player and one building.
Yeah, especially against Mohamed Light very specifically. And speaking of Mohamed Light specifically, all the cards from that deck now out. So Poison gone, Log gone, Bats, Spears, Bomb Tower, etc. And talking about deck picks here for Broken, I think that you talked earlier about, hey, Log's out, go for something that Log hurts. Right, so I don't like the idea of going something baity here, but Mohamed Light did just express recently, oh, and he's in Broken's going kind of baity. All right, let's see how it goes.
You and I were both thinking the same thing, though. You were thinking go to Graveyard.
Yes, right? He just said how much he thinks Graveyard is cheese and how much he hates playing against it. I would have loved to see a Graveyard play here. I love that we do this together. It's so fun.
I know, man. I was just going to say, like, literally you started that sentence, and I was like, I know exactly where he's going to go. I saw the video that was posted. I know that he watches them. I know we talk about this stuff. And, yeah, I'm in the same boat. I would have definitely gone to Graveyard, and we'll see. We'll see how Graveyard would have actually ended up matching up against this Goblin Giant Sparky deck or Goblin Giant beatdown deck. We'll see whether it's the mini P.E.K.K.A. It looks like it will be the Sparky version, I think, because usually the Knight is not there as well as the Dark Prince and the mini P.E.K.K.A.
And we talk about this a lot.
Oh, wow, it is.
Oh, whoa, mini P.E.K.K.A. Just watch that wall breaker go right on by. Like it was a, hey, you're sitting there 0-2 and you let the strike go right down the middle?
He's just hanging out. She's slow, or he's slow, because Big Peg is the girl.
Yeah, why are you just watching? Oh, and Mo doesn't hit the King Tower activation here, showing you just how hard that King Tower activation actually is.
Yeah, nice rage there, though, in the center.
Broken was ready for it. He knew it was a possibility, so nice pickup to not let that turn into a huge problem.
And this is a nice push here by Broken, knowing that Mo doesn't have a good way to get behind or on top of those, doesn't have a big spell, doesn't have a stun plus splash damage available. So good send there by Broken to get a wall breaker on tower.
All right, so we talked about this yesterday, or in the last round. Protect that Magic Archer. He only has arrows and that rage, and this is going to be really interesting whether he can. He's not going to go ahead and take the one free shot here. But this is a chance for Broken to really use the Magic Archer as much as possible.
Yeah, and here we go, exactly as you called it, man. He gets a little aggressive there, tries to get on top of the mini P.E.K.K.A., just pulls it a second too early. And we've seen this, if you've watched Mo's videos, or if you watch Mo play, trying to predict a Magic Archer on him or try to get your own Magic Archer down, it's really difficult. His mind game, like his ability to read mind games, it still shocks me to this day. And that is a great push. That mini P.E.K.K.A. will get a hit. That Magic Archer not going to be enough to stop either of those early enough. 1551 now remains. And there's the Dark Prince you need for a perfect defense here from the best player in the game.
And the Knight does get down to protect the Magic Archer, but not enough because of the minion support. And now you're trying to go opposite lane here. And I understand why he went into that same lane. Oh, that's going to be so much damage.
Wow.
I understand why he went back into that same lane, right? The Magic Archer was healthy there. He wanted to create an opportunity to protect it, so he got the wall breakers down early. I would have liked to see the wall breakers pressure the opposite lane just so that you force some expenditure over there for that 2 elixir rather than give the Dark Prince a free opportunity to hit them and then try to pick up the Knight. But Broken doing the best he can in a really bad situation.
Yeah, and I think part of Broken's bad situation, which, you know what, he might turn it around right here. That Dark Prince lined right up. That Wallbreaker does connect, 1474. So, you know, within striking distance, again, he can get really, really aggressive now. Let's see how the end of this goes, and then we'll get back to what we were talking about just a moment ago. Nice there to stop the bleeding by Mohamed Light. Oh, I was just going to say, I feel like Broken was getting a little too cute. I understand that when you're playing against the best in the world, you need to figure out moments of when to get hyper aggressive. I just think he was being a little too aggressive, a little too quickly. We saw an early Magic Archer. We've seen pushes that are sent into easy counter pushes. We've seen units dropped in the wrong spot. So just a handful of things.
And that was a great night, and Broken maybe just like was in a rhythm and tried to get a lineup when the Magic Archer was completely already distracted the opposite direction. NATO's going to go ahead and switch the sides, doesn't matter. Dark Prince raged up, GG, well played, tower down, and Mohamed Light doing what Mohamed Light does.
Yeah, I mean, really, really great there by Mo. Obviously, you know, it's so easy to talk about all the things that were done correctly by him, the patience, the dual lane pressure, even though the game already felt like it was completely won in one lane, but that's something that he does better than almost anyone else. Anytime that you place a bomb tower offset to the other direction, he's going to go aggressive in that opposite lane just because he can, you know. And you look at the matchup here, obviously a really easy matchup for Mohamed Light. You're in a 70-30 matchup. It makes a lot of sense. You don't have a lot of great spell power. You don't have a lot of great piercing damage. You don't have a lot of great range damage in terms. And then you talk about the Spear Goblins. The other thing I was going to say about this, Rich, is the rage play from Mo. It was just always ready to go. That rage was always on top of those Spear Goblins, and that right there changes it because then you have the arrows plus whatever else to take care of that Magic Archer.
Yeah, and you're getting on those rage on the Spear Goblins. Not only are you getting the even trade 2 for 2, but you're now also typically forcing another response out behind that to pick up whatever the Spear Goblins were meant to defend, and that option is now raged up. So there's so many factors that make that a really high-pressure play that just was unavoidable for Broken. And Mohamed Light with a really good read here. I thought that, again, I would have liked Broken to go the Graveyard route, and Mo getting a really great read here, going, hey, logs out, what are the likely plays that someone who's not thinking the 3 steps ahead that I'm thinking will play? He only goes the 1 to 2 steps ahead, makes a great deck pick, and gets a phenomenal matchup.
And I also wonder, too, I mean, we love Jebas, and I'm sure he's happy to hear that. I'm sure you're happy to hear that, Jebas. But the deck picking, right? If you and I, and if you're going to give credit to your opponent, and I feel like you and I do a good job of, you know, having our ear to the ground, that deck that Mo just played would have done phenomenally against Graveyard. You have the arrows, you have the rage for spell power, you have the Mother Witch to make that matchup just completely broken. You have the mini P.E.K.K.A to set the line and kill things at the bridge if you need. Or if you really need the extra help, you go Goblin Giant and mini P.E.K.K.A to set the line. So there's just so many. And Goblin Giant actually does a pretty good job of cleaning up Graveyard because of the Spear Goblins. So Mo maybe goes, all right, we showed him a little something saying that you don't like Graveyard. Let's go ahead and play something that counters Graveyard and still is one of the best decks in the meta right now.
And here we go, Doodoo versus Sandbox. Doodoo, the Brazilian, who took out his countryman one round ago. Finished top 100 for CRL this year with 190 points, so solid performance overall. Let's see how he fares against a multiple-time world finalist like Sandbox.
And just one more thing, when you click on that matchup conversation with that deck, it is a 70-30 against Graveyard. So I think maybe, Rich, you and I would have got there by Mo and Jebas.
Yeah, that's what happens. Don't play against them. That's my best advice.
Yeah, well, luckily, we're not going to have to worry about that. Here we go. Back to Hog, top of your screen, another version of Mortar that's been out there. One of the few versions that actually still, or a few decks that actually still runs the Evo and Mortar to some success. And, you know, we'll see how this goes. I think just because there is some success with it on the UC leaderboard, it doesn't mean that it'll have success at the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a bummer to me. Evo Mortar just not really popular in any way.
Yeah, well, we'll see how time goes, and maybe at some point they'll give you what you want and make Evo Mortar just a little bit more powerful, or maybe the meta will shift enough to open up opportunities for Evo Mortar. But Mortar overall has been kind of second rate for quite a long time, for a couple of years now, it feels.
Yeah, totally. And it felt like even when it was strong, it was only because the people that maybe loved it at the highest level would find like an opportunity to like force it in. And especially with the Evos, I think it just adds to that conversation. Nice minor there to try to predict the Firecracker. It doesn't actually work out because Sandbox is ready to go with that Valkyrie. But I think because of protecting the Firecracker, he ends up actually getting that cannon cart on tower. Now a Hog Rider in the opposite direction.
Yeah, and good job there spreading very nicely with the Gang and the Dart Goblin to get enough DPS to not let that Hog Rider turn into a huge problem. Doodoo's playing really nicely here. The prediction on the Firecracker well picked up by Sandbox, but like you said, he's creating lots of challenges that Sandbox isn't going to get a walk in the park here.
Yeah. And he's running Evo'd Mortar, so he's already got a handful of points in my book as he comes in with another push here, high Inferno Tower, to take care of that Evo'd Mortar, and definitely something you want to do. Even though Evo Mortar is not popular, its ability to just take a game once those goblins get on top of tower and it shoots is absolutely staggering.
I am a little surprised that he's primarily using the Evo Mortar offensively, and maybe it's because he's trying to get the +1 trade. And here we go, seeing some defensive use of that mortar. And I think maybe it's because he's trying to get the +1 trade against the Inferno Tower, and then turn that into an advantage. But you also can't be giving up hog shots, and you really cannot be giving up that much from the Evolve Firecracker.
Yeah, I mean, that's really it, is that Evo to Firecracker getting on top of the Skeleton King and being able to get to the tower and being able to get on top of that cannon cart is just devastating. I mean, the cannon cart is kind of your second line of defense there. You're starting to build it from the back so you can get this big downhill push, and that Firecracker just kills it all right there on the vine.
Interesting choice there for Sandbox. I think he might have expected the cannon cart to keep on going and was trying to get an emergency pickup to not let it connect on tower. Either way, that hog ends up just feeding the elixir of Doodoo, who is out to a small lead, but does have the dual lane pressure for the moment. Does he have a mortar? And a very late mortar saves him from some real significant damage, but oh, wow.
I don't know if the hog shot came in or not, or if it was just the snowball, but either way, 12-32 to 14-23. Doodoo now finally being able to get back on the offensive. Sandbox ready for it. It pre-cycles that Ice Spirit, has the Inferno Tower ready to go up high, but that Skeleton Dragon will... No. There we go. Does get the second shot, but the first one does not splash.
Look at the very nice lineup with the Evo Firecracker, though, to get that chip on the left-hand side. Just the little sparkles going just far enough to create some problems. And we are once again going to be very close with just 19 seconds left.
Yeah, and I like where the Evo Firecracker's at right now. I feel like she's finally like pretty balanced. Maybe a high Valkyrie here to catch that Dark Goblin. No, goes with the Skellies instead.
EQ, Snowball, 666. Fireball will do enough to get the win the opposite direction.
All right.
Doodoo, smart performance there, and gets game number 1 against the former world finalist.
Yeah, really, really well played. It felt like things kind of got a little off kilter for a bit for Doodoo, and I really like what he did was just, all right, I need to sit back, I need to play defense, I need to get back in charge of my cycle. You look here, matchup pretty even. You know, it's tough to say 6 of 8 and 5. I don't know. I feel like that probably gets pretty much to a 50-50 here, and that's what it felt like. It felt like there was good plays on both sides, small mistakes from both the players, and you know, that Dart Goblin I think was really kind of the X factor in terms of, if you talk about a matchup, Sandbox had to do some really either overspending on top of the Dart Goblin or some really nice lineups with the Firecracker. That's really the only way you can deal with the Dart Goblin when it's on the other side of the board.
So game number 1 and gone for Doodoo again. For those of you just joining us, this is Royale Masters, and their dual format means you only lose cards that you win with. So Sandbox still has all that Hog EQ deck available. Doodoo, though, no Mortar, no Fireball, no Miner, no Skelly King. And Skelly King has really been pretty much the only champion we're seeing a lot of these days. We're seeing a little bit of Archer Queen. We're seeing a little bit of Mighty Miner. Golden Knight basically doesn't exist, and every once in a while the Monk shows up. But now we have kind of the best champion out. Curious of where Doodoo goes here in game 2.
Yeah, and I see in the chat, we don't want to call him Doodoo either, but if that's his name, that's his name, okay? If you come up with a better name, then we'll call him that. I like that he... double D. Whatever it is, Doodoo, I think, also did a good job because, you know, we talked about this a bit last weekend in terms of picking decks. I like that this deck doesn't really have a lot of overlap. It does use a champion, but champions, like you said, Rich, aren't super popular. Yeah. And yeah, you use the big spell, but you're always going to have to, I mean, not always, but you're usually going to use a big spell. So, you know, if Fireball's out of the way, it's okay. There's a lot of ways to kind of cover that being gone. So I do at least like that Doodoo used an off-meta deck, we'll call it that, an off-meta deck here in game number 1, puts himself in a good position to use some of the most popular decks in the game right now, and we'll see where he goes. I'm still curious, like, you know, with all the conversation with balances and the Evo Bats coming in and the nerfs, blah, 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 blah. I'm really wondering if Goblin Giant Sparky is going to change at all. You know, not a lot is being touched in there other than the Evo Knight, and also people are saying that it's like broken, but no one's like as mad about it as they are about when other cards have truly been broken.
What an interesting choice out of Dada is he goes to double bait here with the Skeleton Barrel Wall Breakers. Not what I expected.
Cal representative. Yeah, he might have... Yeah, because I was just going to say, he might have Dark Goblin in this deck as well, but obviously he can't, so he needs something else ranged, and there you go. To add to that double bait aspect, he goes with Rascals here. Obviously not a very popular card in the game. Used to be one of my favorite cards when they were first brought into it. And there you go. That's frustrating, Rich. You got the Barrel, you got the Goblins, you got the Rascal Girls, you got the Wall Breakers. That Mother Witch is she's gonna eat tonight.
This is not the... For a number of reasons, I really thought he was going to go with the Remy deck. You know, I thought he was going to want to have NATO for some good control, and just... Oh, but he played Miner, so he couldn't play Remy.
Right. But
maybe
this Overwhelm already is not great. Ram Rider, there it is. Yep, I was like, the Ram Rider's got to come in soon, and this is a tough spot. If you're Doodoo, you kind of have to use that ability to knock back the Ram Rider, but now you're just left with a charge on the tower, tanking for that Skeleton Dragon behind. So that is a really perfectly timed Ram Rider there by Sandbox. And now with a slight elixir advantage, I'd love to see if he's going to be able to push that into Evoed recruits at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I would see... Oh, just goes aggressive at the bridge, forces out a response. This Heal Spirit...
Does he get the Heal Spirit land?
No,
wow, that's actually a really nice kite there by Doodoo. That could have been pretty devastating.
Yeah, I don't know what he had in his hand there, but I really thought Recruits would have been the move at that moment. And here he goes, Recruits in the back to respond to the 3-3 split, plus Ghost, plus Skelly Barrel, plus Goblins. But you've got...
And there's no barrel available, so you see, Mother Witch come down on the right-hand side, a late barrel on the left, but double Wall Breaker connection there, and that is a really nice send with a big counter push to deal with, but no big spell to get on those Rascal Girls. I mean, I think it's probably Lightning, but... Oh, it is Fireball, actually, never mind.
Yeah, Fireball gets in, one Skeleton Dragon working on the left-hand side, and this is not going to get a lot, but it's going to do something more important, which is create a nice elixir advantage as he easily counters this Mighty Miner with the Recruits.
And this is such an interesting thing. I mean, I really do love when you see players, they recognize, look, if I have this one combination of my cards, you really have to overspend to stop it. But I think that it worked earlier in terms of tanking for those wall breakers behind and not having a barrel in cycle. I don't think Sandbox is going to put himself in that position again. I understand that Doodoo went for it, but I think you got to give Sandy a little bit more respect than that.
I like that he ate the wall breakers there. There was no reason to defend those on such a healthy tower on the right-hand side. Set up and defend the next push and turn this into a real opportunity. Now, he took more damage to the left-hand side than I think he was anticipating. 785 suddenly lead in for Sandbox. So this is an interesting bridge fight we're about to get into.
Yeah, I mean, and Sandbox is doing the correct thing by not using spell power to kind of... Yep, that's it right there. Beautiful stuff. And that's the Fireball comes in to close thing off. I was going to say, Sandbox is doing a great job of, like you said, Rich, soaking up damage to turn it into bigger counter pushes, whether that's eating wall breakers, whether that's not dropping a Fireball defensively and eating just a couple shots or one wall breaker. It was just starting to control the board as we got deeper and deeper into that matchup. And as you guys can see, it's not really a favorable matchup for Sandbox. I don't think it's really as strong as 60-40 as you can see at the bottom of the screen, but that's obviously with a lot less cards. This was just a situation, I think, where, you know, I don't really love Doodoo's deck. There's a lot of pieces of it that like I understand, but you know, we talked about the Mighty Miner not being super popular. I think the synergy here with the Rascals and the Recruits, it kind of makes sense on paper, but it ends up being a lot easier to clean up than you'd actually like it to be. And then, you know, it really came down to, if I can get wall breakers behind a tank, then Sandbox is going to have trouble dealing with that. So Sandbox started to get more splash units or more units on the board, period, to retarget onto those wall breakers.
You know, I think we don't have, the data's not great on that matchup from Royale API, right? WinCon +2, WinCon +3 means that they really haven't seen much of it. I think the Mother Witch just made this matchup almost impossible for Doodoo, right? Because not only does the Mother Witch slaughter pretty much everything you have on the board and turn it into counter pressure, you have no spell to get on it. So Sandbox can just play Mother Witches with impunity. He can play Skelly Dragons almost with impunity. And really, that got a lot closer than I anticipated. And part of it was, I think that Sandbox might have gotten a little distracted on how he was defending skeleton barrels specifically, right? Because he was trying to, he got caught once or twice by wall breakers, trying to use the barb barrel there, the skeleton barrel there. That heal spirit could have been a lot more valuable against some of those skeleton barrels. And while it did do some great work on the offensive side of the board, it could have maybe given him a little more of a berth, a wider gap on the defensive side of the board.
I think that's a good call there. It's a great breakdown in terms of, I think, what went wrong. And now we see here in our final game between these two, all the cards that are unavailable, the 16 cards that are unavailable, obviously 8 per player. And Doodoo going to what should most likely just be minor poison control with this Xe. Nope, excuse me, as soon as I say that, the drill comes out. But, you know, this deck is fascinating because it looks good on paper and it makes sense with what's good in the meta, but it just doesn't seem to hit the right way. There's something about it. I don't know what it is. It just doesn't seem as strong as it should be.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting because he's given up a lot of damage, and part of that was due to overextending with the NATO early, right?
Yep.
You really should not be giving up any hog connections in single when you have bomb tower, NATO, and a cycle deck. It's that just as overextension. And I think that the real challenge here, Andrew, is that the desire to really get that Xe NATO combination and to pull the trigger on that too early ends up making people fall behind with this deck early when they shouldn't.
Yeah, and you understand it, right? Because that lineup with the Executioner and the NATO is so devastating so quickly. But, you know, Rich, that's 8 elixir right there, and I think you hit the nail on the head talking about just the over-aggression. Yes, it's a good lineup, but you also got to, like, figure out what your opponent has, right? You still need to get back to the basics of Clash Royale, and your opponent showed you in their first 2 cards, they have Ice Spirit and Hog. And if you add in the 3rd card there with Firecracker, that pretty much tells you exactly what they're running. You know what their big spell is. Their small spell is probably Log or Snowball. There's a lot of things you already know about the deck, so I don't think there's any reason to get that aggressive that early on. To go all the way back to your point of, yes, you're running a cycle deck with 2 buildings and NATO. There's no way that Hog connection should happen that big in single.
Yeah, that was pretty massive, and now it's just Sandbox, don't make mistakes. Just play clean. You have the Valk to counter the drill pretty consistently, and you can try to control the Xyz up high, especially with the Inferno Tower. There really is no reason for Sandbox to let this one go at this point.
No, and even this push, it feels a little over-aggressive, but it's the great idea that he goes, all right, your Executioner's in the back. Now you can't get on top of my Evoed Firecracker, so I'm going to create a lot of pressure at the bridge for you to most likely make a defensive mistake. And another Hog Rider hit comes in. Now down to 368. Sandbox is happily in Ice Spirit cycle, EQ cycle, Snowball cycle range, and there we go.
Yeah. Just easy does it. No big trouble here. And matchups, here's the thing, right? We talk about matchups from a perfect standpoint, right? When you start a game, what's a matchup like? Well, I don't know if we have any data on it. It's more of like a theoretical conversation. But how matchups change once damage is done, right? What are decks that can afford to be 600 behind? And what are decks that really can't afford that at all to be 600 behind in single? And this is one of those situations where as soon as Sandbox had a significant lead, it was pretty much, that matchup went from what I'm going to guess was probably a 60-40 in his favor to an 80-20.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting stat that I would love. I mean, I'm sure Alpi and SML are just like, guys, just leave us alone. Do you know how much we already do? But seriously, I think after taking 500, I'll even go a step further than that. After taking 1,000 more damage than your opponent, what does a matchup look like? Because, you know, you'll see a lot with the deck on the left-hand side of your screen right now. At the highest level, if that hog breaks through early on in single and gets 2 hits, you'll see people calling good game because they know it's already at a 90-10. They need to make a massive mistake. And Rich, you look there at 6+, and that's kind of what you and I were talking about, right? But then you look at the actual matchup of, you know, 6 out of 8 cards, and it's more 50-50. It makes sense because single elixir, that deck that Sandbox is running, should do a little bit better. But I just feel like, you know, similarly to game number 1, I just think Doodoo did a little bit too much trying to be too cute, because when you go back and you watch that game with Sandbox, and a lot of times some of the most impressive games at the highest level, there's nothing fancy about it. Yeah. It's slow, methodical play, patient play. I know exactly what you have now, so now I know when to get aggressive, right? So you and I were literally just saying there's no reason for Sandbox to get aggressive again in this game. The second that Executioner cycled in the back, Sandbox uses his brain. He goes, now there's no way to get on top of the Firecracker. That's when you get aggressive. That's patience. Let's take a look here at the bracket, catch you guys up with where we're at here today. Rich, it's been a good day for Sandbox so far. Mohammed Light also there staying alive. Where are we at?
2 up, 2 down for Mo and Sandbox each, as they've both made it to our Final Four, the semifinals, and they're awaiting the winners of Trainer Adnan and Akaza on Mohammed Light's side, and Ta versus Kiyurem. I believe that's what it is, Kiyurem. I saw someone break it down phonetically in the chat earlier, and then I scrolled on past it, but I think it's, Caillou, someone says Kiyurem is what they are saying. Yeah, so.
I like Caillou.
Caillou, yeah, let's just go with Caillou. That's easy. I like that. Yeah. Caillou versus Sandbox, potentially, if he can get past his next opponent. So we're already getting pretty deep into this one, and my expectation on face value is a Mo Sandbox final, but you have the opportunity for some guys to come out and make some big upsets.
Yeah, I mean, Adnan is definitely someone that can do that. That's our next match here, is Adnan versus Akaza. And then to talk about Akaza here, someone who, you know, you and I, or at least I don't want to speak too much for you, I'm not very familiar with, and you look at their achievements, not a lot. CRL 2023, they showed up a couple times. The highest finish they ever got was 32. They had a ranked finish in May of 5th place, though, which is really impressive. I think the other thing is that the Frenchman here, that's where Akaza is from, even though the name might imply somewhere else. Akaza is actually 250 points deep in CRL 2023 with a rank of 47, which is pretty wild to me that they have 3351 on the UC leaderboard, which is very, very high up there, and that they're in the top 50 in CRL. But that just shows, we always talk about this, there's always levels to this game. That top 100 to that top like 25 is a massive drop off. Not always in skill, but at least in notoriety.
Akaza, also known as Nexus. So some of you might know the name Nexus better than you know the Akaza from Team Psycho Esport. Does have a YouTube channel. I don't know if I can link that in the chat because I don't know if I have those permissions, but is a content creator out of France on both YouTube and TikTok.
There you go. Yeah, nice of you to plug the channel there. It's a growing channel here, and obviously a player that is growing in skill. I mean, again, 47th on CRL leaderboard is really, really impressive. We'll see if Adnan can meet the medal hero of the Frenchman.
And if you like Expo, that is what Nexus, a.k.a. Akaza, does on both of his channels, is primarily Expo. So you can go ahead and find him on YouTube, Nexus, Nexus CRL.
Huh. I feel a little bit less strongly towards Akaza already, but that's fine. It's fine. Even Mo Light just did an Expo cycle deck. I don't know if Expo's actually back, but to those that still, I will say I think Expo players are the most loyal, right? Like 2.6 players adjust. I feel like Minor Poison players adjust. Even Graveyard players adjust. But Expo players, it feels like they're just like, this is what I play forever.
And I think I put the link in the chat there for his YouTube channel. I don't know if it'll link out. You might have to copy and paste it. But if you want to see some Expo gameplay, go check him out. Right now, though, no Expo, doing a little Royal Hogs Earthquake cycle.
Yeah, Royal Hogs EQ, you've got a lot of answers, though, if you're Adnan. Every single card you have, other than like 2 of them, can go in both lanes to deal with those piggies. You have Fireball, you have Skeleton King. Definitely not the easiest matchup here. I'm assuming once we get deeper into double elixir, we'll see a lot less of those mortars being used defensively and a lot more units just getting on the board, because that's kind of the name of the game here when you're going up against the deck here on the bottom of your screen. You need to have dual lane pressure so you don't give too much value to that Royal Delivery, and you also have really only one card that can cover the entire map in the Firecracker. So, I think you slow play it until you get a little deep in double, especially in triple, and then you just start to overwhelm in both lanes.
This is an interesting matchup, right? You have 2 players who quietly made top 50 in CRL this year, not to a ton of fanfare, but Adnan definitely, that's a nice little King Tower activation there, but is that going to mean anything when there's so much coming right at your towers? And that's going to be a couple of big-time hits from that Skelly King.
Yeah, I mean, that is the interesting thing about this matchup, is that King Tower activation, while it's not as imperative or important or detrimental as it is in a graveyard matchup, it is really going to help with the dual lane pressure. But as you just said, man, is it a little too little too late? 1052 remaining on one, 1381 on the other to Adnan's healthy 1771.
Well, now this does change the math a bit, though. If you can control these mortars, you now have a lot of help against those miners. And that's significant, right? It means you're spending less elixir in these final 90 seconds and can focus more on trying to get that offense in.
Yeah, and I really like what Adnan is doing. I feel like we haven't seen a lot of mortar players lately really try to protect their mortar, and he's done it a good amount of times already, especially against that Inferno. When you know that this is the matchup that you're in, you can protect that mortar pretty easily, or at least make your opponents spend a lot more than they want to. And the cool thing is that you have cheap cards to do it. You can always kind of test it out with Spear Goblins or Goblin Gang before you commit too much.
One of the hard things for Nexus Akaza in this matchup is that he doesn't have phenomenal ways to both control the mortar and pick up those miners, right? He's been trying to use those goblins. So you can take the -1 trade with your Inferno Tower, but Adnan's doing a good job protecting it, like you said. And then what's your best miner pickups? Well, the stab goblins, especially here in triple, are going to get fireballed off a lot of the time. So he needs to just focus on pressure, and try to not let Adnan spend much at all on offense. And here you go.
And the Kobe shot there, and that's exactly, just called perfectly. Miner comes in, fireball on top. You have the Skeleton Dragons over the middle, distracting that Inferno Tower. You got the Skeleton King stacking souls against these piggies. That Firecracker almost gets on top of tower. Nice last-second miner there, though, from Adnan to turn it around.
He's got to get log, got to get EQ in here. Fireball going to do its damage. Earthquake trying to tick away, not going to be enough. Miner goes to the opposite side here, just to be a little cheeky, I think, from trainer Adnan, and game number 1, victory by 229 HP.
Yeah, that was a great game, really. That was well played by both players. I think the fact that Akaza had the delivery really helped that matchup, and of course that King Tower activation that was really more done by Adnan than it was by Akaza. Akaza, I guess, did a good job of where he placed that Firecracker, and you can see right there the matchup not the greatest for Akaza, which is why it did feel like he played it really well. Again, as that game went on, with the ability to control your opponent's win condition in the Royal Hogs, or not living in that EQ cycle world that we were in a while ago, it just seems like as this game goes on, if you were able to hang in single elixir and you don't make just like egregious mistakes in double and triple, you should be able to just take the game like Adnan did, slowly, surely, by a couple hundred HP. So
now game number 1, as we've been through many games, Mortar, Fireball, Miner, this exact deck has been going out after game 1 a lot, so a lot of people taking early wins with it. And now we really have been wondering what's the secret, what's the opening that you walk through once these cards are out, and I feel like the player playing from behind hasn't quite figured out the math for that one quite yet.
Honestly, man, it really does feel like Lava Hound is still really good out there. Lava Hound Barbs is still really good. The Goblin Giant Sparky deck does not match up well against Lava. I think if you know how to play Lava at all, even this deck, right? Spears, Skeleton Dragons, and Fireball are very popular in a lot of decks right now. And those are also good counters to air decks. I don't know. It does get a little bit tough, but I think going to the skies. We haven't seen a lot of it here today. It is good in the meta. Those evoed barbs are tough to deal with. Your opponent doesn't have fireball. They don't have skeleton dragons. I think maybe that's the way to go if you feel comfortable.
Well, you know, there's been quite a bit of Lava Loon and Minor Loon being played by Nexus, by Akaza in the last few days. So we'll see if he goes that direction. 16 games played with a pretty heavy version of Lava Loon Minor, 18 games played with just Minor Loon, and 22 games played with Lava Loon over the last week or so. So I think you might be on point with what he's comfortable with. He also has been playing the Remy deck with Drill as another option. So two different looks. The Remy deck with Drill does, again, have the ability to abuse that Magic Archer and the NATO for comfort.
Yeah, and then I think if you are Adnan, I mean, maybe just throw a Mother Witch in your deck, right? Yeah. Regardless of what the actual deck that you want to run is, if you can plug a Mother Witch in there, you cover Graveyard and you start to cover Lava a little bit more, that could kind of be your ace up the sleeve. Obviously, if you get a really bad matchup and they end up going, you know, right back to Hog or something, you could be in trouble. But, you know, that's maybe where I hedge my bet. You got to kind of, you got to adjust if you're Akaza to where you think Adnan is going to go. That's the other fun thing about Royale Masters is that the traditional version with our dual mode is sometimes being able to run back the same deck is not the best option, right? Sometimes you just kind of, like you said, you know, what is it, horse to the water or horse to the barn syndrome, where you're like, look, just because I can do it, I should do it, you know? And I don't know if that's always the case, because that is an interesting thing right now when you talk about recruits being out, mortar being out, fireball being out, skeleton king being out. Maybe he just runs it back and also throws in magic archer. So we'll see here as the players are, their time is ticking down to get to that next game as they're deciding what decks they want to go with, probably having a similar conversation to what we're having here on broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be it. And I am curious. Mother Witch is interesting because most of what Nexus Akaza runs Fireball. He leans on Fireball pretty heavily. I mean, Fireball and Arrows are the kind of the two things he's been playing the most as of late. So then you get into, okay, are you going to run Mother Witch? Are you going to create some other options for targets for those big spells? Or going to be in a situation like we saw earlier where the EQ log against the Magic Archer, for example, didn't really have any other jobs. Its job was just get the Magic Archer off for a -1 trade plus potentially some chip damage. So I think that Mother Witch is smart. But are you creating more opportunities for that? Are you creating more targets for that Fireball than just the Mother Witch?
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what you have to do. You can't just let their one ability. I mean, even if we go back to that rage with Mo and the Spear Goblins, you got to figure out a way to make that rage come out somewhere else. I mean, obviously easier said than done against the best in the world. And yeah, here in the chat, someone's saying, I didn't see Momo anywhere yet. He's already played a game. I see someone else asking, will Momo win this competition again? Well, he actually lost last weekend to Clown, who played very, very well. So we'll see if Momo can redeem himself here. But obviously, as we wait on Akaza and Adnan to finish this set, so is Mohamed Light. We got one more set here in our, what are we in, semifinals now? Is that right?
Yeah, we're almost to our semifinals. We're still in the quarterfinals. Yep. The winner of this matchup is going to go up against Mohamed Light in the next round. So good luck, whoever wins this one. Right now, it's Adnan with the advantage and going to go Hog. So let's see, I'm very curious to see, is this a NATO-based deck like I was recommending for Akaza? We'll see.
Yeah, with the Inferno Tower out already, it feels like it might just be Hog Rider again, or maybe what he just ran, and there it is. I mean, it does feel, for all the time we just spent, gentlemen, you're just going to go right back to the well, Akaza, so we'll see if it works out, or, again, if he did change his deck just a little bit. Already you see, Rich, no Fireball because of that Earthquake, and obviously no Fireball available. So is there a card that baits Fireball out more than just the piggies? Or is it going to be the exact situation you talk about? Well, I made it so that the Fireball has to be used here, but I really need it to be used there. So is there a card to bait that Fireball out elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And the other thing, too, is who gets the early lead here, right? Because we've seen so many times when you're going log EQ versus log EQ in the final moments of a game, that whoever has that slight advantage, if you're a couple hundred, if you're one cycle ahead, that could be the deciding factor. So right now, all even Stevens, when you go crosswise, who's going to make the big first mistake? Log does clear. That's going to be a couple of hog shots here.
Yeah, that is a huge couple hog shots early on. You talk about an 800 HP advantage. Luckily, I guess, because it's not both Hog Riders, and Royal Hogs is just a little bit different in terms of matchup. Obviously, it doesn't feel as rough as when you're just in a double Hog EQ mirror matchup and you've already gone down a couple Hog hits. That already can feel like game over sometimes, but I don't know. It's already a bad spot.
Evolve Firecracker cycle to the left-hand lane. Royal Hogs up in front. Earthquake trying to clear, and Akaza's just saying, hey, you need to play something to respond to this. Gets the King Tower activated, and the Valkyrie does her job perfectly. Adnan running away with this early, it feels.
Yeah, I mean, it's just clean play, nothing fancy, just looking at the matchup, looking at the cards, trying to take advantage of what is in and out of cycle. This Valkyrie's going to get 2 hits. No, excuse me, just the 1 because of the King Tower activation. But even that is just, it just shows when you look at the Elixir, the fact that the Valkyrie is still standing, you know, Akaza's having to sacrifice tower HP to make up for an Elixir advantage. Adnan's just doing everything correctly.
And you saw the log from Adnan on the right-hand side trying to predict the Fire Spirit last sequence, and then Akaza trying to do the same thing, but both players ahead of those predictions with the log defending on the right, and then Adnan defending with the Valk on the left-hand side. So we've already seen one big prediction. The pre-log on the Goblins ended up being the big opening, and it's going to be hard to get a similarly impactful prediction going forward.
Inferno plus Evoed Firecracker. This Evoed Firecracker can turn into a nice counter push. We'll see exactly what Adnan wants to throw down, if it's just Hog and pre-EQ, and yes, that's exactly what it is. Gets a lot of Elixir out of his opponent to find his opponent down 1 with a delivery on the board, so Adnan just winning in damage, winning in the Elixir conversation. Evoed Firecracker, I don't know about that. That's just a little too aggressive for me, and Adnan goes, I'm not going to bite.
Yeah, a little desperate in that moment, and now down to 11:54 on the right-hand side. This is just slipping away from Akaza very, very quickly. And now the dual lane damage in, and I don't know what, if any, route there is for him to get back in this.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even from the very beginning, it felt like that Hog breaking on through, getting a couple hits, it already seemed to separate the two of them, and, you know, I mean, that's really it, right? You got the EQ, you got the same building on both sides. The Valkyrie's actually been playing really, really nicely for Adnan. And, yeah, we'll see. We'll see if anything crazy can happen here for Akaza in the next 45 seconds.
Can he create a full system failure on the phone of his opponent?
Yeah, I mean, you're watching it, yeah, in that log, just getting the early Firecracker. It's just like there's no way to change anything up. You don't have the ability to put a tank in front of your Hogs. I think that's the other thing here. When you have that delivery in the Goblins and the Fire Spirit, I mean, there's literally no tank on the board. And, you know, getting a tank in front of your Hogs isn't always the best way to do it, but at least you could maybe get a tank in front of your Goblins or something. I don't know. It just feels like this deck is missing a piece, and Adnan was able to exploit that piece being gone.
This would be hilarious if somehow this turns the last second. Not going to happen. Trainer Adnan, easy 2-0. And Akaza, maybe some nerves on stream here as he gets taken down after a couple key misses.
Yeah, you know, just not... I just didn't love that deck in game number 2. You know, I understand that, you know, exactly like what we said, you can go back to the well, but is that always the way that you want to go? It's... you know, exactly what we ran in game number 1, and it felt like the tank not being there in both situations was not ideal, but it really felt like it was missing in game number 2. That Valkyrie was so great for Adnan.
It was massive. The Valkyrie just shut things down, and you talked about it, right? The difference between having a mini tank and not having a mini tank. And Akaza going with the triple spell here in lieu of having a mini tank, right? Hoping that maybe that delivery can do double duty. It really couldn't. It really couldn't. So he was hoping he could DPS or keep up with the cycle and get those Inferno Towers down enough. But one time out of cycle, you get predicted. That's a huge amount of damage. And then we saw at the end there just a misplaced Inferno Tower. Easy hog shots. GG, well played.
And I think that's exactly the thing is you get predicted, right? It makes it so much more predictable when you only have one response, right? You can't time the delivery perfectly every time. So maybe, you're going to have to go to your goblins. And that's why Adnan was looking for the I mean, they're both looking for the pre-log, but when you talk about the ability to get around it, just dropping a Valkyrie down on the board gets that extra elixir out and also creates a counter push. So it's just a slight advantage. Obviously the matchup there on paper, 50-50 with 6 of 8. So nothing too crazy, but very well played by Adnan. And I think we've seen that in our last 2 sets, the more experienced player in Sandbox and in Adnan just pausing a little bit more, right? Like you use the word desperate. I think that's a really, really great word to use because that is how some of those plays feel. And then, as AC, just a little cute. I felt like we saw some cute stuff there out of the last set. And then here in this set, the same thing. And slow and steady has worked for both the 2 veterans.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way to do it. And I see a question in the chat. Who knows when CRL 2023 will take place? Well, bad news. The regular season is done. We already had 7 instances of the regular season, starting all the way back in March, running through the last month that we just had in September. But the good news is November 24th to 26th, Helsinki, Finland. That will be the Clash Royale League World Finals, also the Clash of Clans World Finals. And if you have like a private jet or just feel like spending some money, whatever it might be, right across the water in Sweden, the same weekend as the Brawl Stars World Finals. So you could even be doing like a cycle. Like, go hit the first half of Clash of Clans in the morning, get some Brawl Stars middle afternoon, I don't know what time Brawl Stars is, and then come back for CRL and maybe even do like a little bounce back and forth and get 1 day of each. Who knows? Just triple dip and get the entire Superverse in one weekend way up there in the cold north.
And I'm pretty sure we're going to be on the same schedule as we were last year.
Yes.
I think that's what we were told, which is really, really nice. So if you remembered what time that was in your particular part of the world, your specific part of the world, it's going to be that same time this year once again. I can't wait for it. Here we go. Ice Wizard Tombstone means we're finally going to see a little bit of GY, which has been a lot more popular as of late. Still not in the top of the most used decks on the Ultimate Champion leaderboard, but it is getting higher up there.
And Caillou Rem, I've been told in the chat, is the name of a Pokemon. It turns out it is considered one of the strongest dragon-type Pokemon in the world. So that's, I guess, trying to get some dragon inspiration is the young Guatemalan player.
I saw someone write that in the chat, and I'm very glad that you brought it up.
Well, I mean, it's important information.
It's a fact. It is.
It's critical for how we evaluate this player's success and failure. And someone was asking about Minor Prince MK. Well, here you go. Here's a variation of it out of Caillou Rem running into Splash Yard. Yeah, and this is actually kind of interesting because Splash Yard, one of the things Splash Yard can struggle with is keeping up with heavy, high DPS ground pushes. You've obviously got the Knight and the Barbarrel and the Tombstone, but aside from that, you can get yourself overwhelmed on the ground. So we'll see if our Pokemon friend here can take advantage of the fact that there's really only the one big tank for Ta, even if it is probably the most favored tank in the game. And I don't see this deck anywhere in the battle history of Caillou Rem, so trying to do a good job here of being unpredictable, showing some versatility. And for a player who has sort of limited competitive experience, started with Q-Lash in 2022 and a couple of team events like the National League, trying to maybe show some versatility and give us a preview of what he might do in 2024.
Yeah, and if you're Ta here, you're really happy with this start. I mean, you're in single elixir, you got through it, you were the one that actually had the damage lead, now you're in double. This is when your deck should be able to start to really shine. And I think the biggest thing about this deck is, having that Evo Knight to deal with these big pushes. And then I wonder I was just going to say, I wonder what else, though, is going to come down on the ground. I was saying maybe some opposite lane pressure might happen, but instead uses a defensive graveyard. And Rich, that might be the way to go here.
Yeah, I guess the big question is, can he cycle back to support this? And the Prince does connect, but can he support this Baby Dragon for anything? And goes for it with the Barbarrel, doesn't get really anything out of it, though.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what I was kind of getting at. This is so tanky with such high DPS on the ground. You can see it's like Ta's having to spend so much, and he always loses his tank. So here we go. Now gets the Baby Dragon across the bridge. Does the miner block? It does. What a great block there. Then bats to come in. But does he have Elixir to deal with these 2 baby dragons?
Nope.
Oh, wow.
No, nothing in cycle for it. Plenty of Elixir, but all the wrong cards. And that's some baby dragon belches just absolutely ruining that tower like the upholstery of a car after a different type of belch.
I feel like if you see arrows come out on top of your double 100% HP baby dragons, you have to smile. I feel like Toss saw that. He was like, oh, this is wonderful for me. So here we go. Royal Ghost plus Prince push on the left. Gets back around to another Tombstone. Knight preoccupied on the right-hand side. Should be able to get another Knight down if necessary. And that might be necessary. Now, nope, never mind. That Mega Knight does get the Skellies out, but not off the board to deal with that Prince.
And notice the patience, not just trying to get poison out there, and kaboom, tower down. Ta just completely shreds that matchup here in game number 1.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you got to look at the kind of the levels to this game, and it felt like that was where Ta recognized, I mean, yeah, maybe he just recognized, he goes, look, if I go double Baby Dragon here at the bridge, you really only have 2 cards to deal with my air units, and your bats just got nadoed off the board, right? They got nadoed because they were there to protect the graveyard. Your Firecracker is the only thing that can hurt these Baby Dragons, so let me use them. The recognition of that early on from Ta, really, really great stuff. You look at the matchup conversation here, 8 of 8, only sample size at 12. They give the favor to the Mega Knight deck. You go out, you pull that out to 7 of 8, and it becomes a much more favorable matchup for Ta there. And again, it makes sense. There's no way to get to the skies there. Once you kind of figure out the ground game, which Ta did, it should be GG well played.
Yeah, that was a fascinating matchup, and the Knight obviously being so critical in defending, but using everything else to just never let the Mega Knight and Prince get away from you and start creating huge problems. That was just a great job done by Ta to play this deck from a control perspective rather than a really aggressive perspective and get a very nice win.
Yeah, and that's, one of the things that Mo talked about, right? When he was talking about why that deck is so frustrating is, not only is it incredibly defensive, but the way to defend the graveyard, there's still the RNG aspect of that. And then you add in the fact that if you're playing this deck and you're going to defend a graveyard with something like Bats, that NATO, if it's not used defensively, it is still one of the best offensive pushes there in terms of GUI. So top of your screen, already looking like Ram Rider, could be a version of Balloon or Bridge Spam, but feels like Ram when you see that. Lumberjack with Heal Spirit, we shall see though. And looks like we're going to go to Goblin Giant plus something else, bottom of your screen.
And Mini P.E.K.K.A to pick up, but gives up a ton of damage before it gets down there and takes some damage itself. So nice early lead for Caillou Rem, and there you go, Ram Rider, nice call, Andrew, as it goes and stuns the Mini P.E.K.K.A and goes coast to coast, despite the fireball stopping the full speed charge.
1686 early on. I don't know what it is with these Ram Rider decks. Like there's been versions of them over the last several months that have been like really unpopular, other than just the one that was really popular. They haven't been played a lot, but it always seems like they're incredibly effective. Ram Rider still seems like one of the stronger win conditions in the game, but she's just really underutilized.
I mean, I think that Ram Rider is surprisingly matchup dependent, right? Like, it doesn't feel like it should be as matchup dependent as some of the big beatdown decks. But, there are times when Ram Rider hasn't really changed much, but what's popular defensively has changed, and it's changed dramatically. And she just kind of is dependent on what meta we're currently playing in, and right now we're in a meta that seems to be favoring a comeback for the Ram Rider.
Yeah, and and this deck specifically may be a little tougher for someone else said it's Caillou Ram, whatever. Curum, Caillou Ram, maybe for them here when you talk about the fact that like there is no way to stun other than the fireball, but you look at the barbs, you look at the Mini P.E.K.K.A, that's a lot of damage that can come in very, very quickly. But then you throw the recruits in front, I think that's going to be a little bit of a struggle for Ta, is if there's a good tank in front of that Ram Rider, how does he not get it on top of tower? How does he really truly stop all damage?
And there we go. The rage to get the Goblin Giant on tower. Mini P.E.K.K.A and Dark Prince behind. Mini P.E.K.K.A goes slam, slam. Give me those pancakes, son! And that's going to be GG with 30 seconds left. Absolute devastation.
I mean, I think the problem here when we're watching this is it feels like Ta is playing at the highest level, and it feels like Kyurem is playing just one level below that. You know, it's in both of these games, we're seeing Kyurem kind of reach, and what we've seen 2 times now from Ta is you're going to make one cycle mistake, and I'm going to take advantage of it. What did you do this time? You just overspent. You just overspent in the right-hand lane, so I'm just going to sell out at the left. There's no reason for Kyurem to get that aggressive this early on. And then same thing with game number 1. It was, look at your cycle, look at what you have to stop my baby dragons. You have nothing. You already played your firecracker. Your bats are out of cycle, so I'm going to punish you for that. You know, again, the matchup conversation does come back in, but I don't know. I think that was just too easy for Ta on that push.
And then there were 4. Great work by Tom. Makes it to our semifinals, and we've only got 4 matches left. 2 semis, a third-place match, and our grand championship. Taking a look at that matchup here, and yeah, just Kyurem just not able to find the purchase early, and if you're not ready for the Goblin Giant, Dark Prince, Mini P.E.K.K.A, Rage, hammer push when it comes down, good luck and good night.
And that's exactly it. That is the push. That is why this deck exists. You have to be ready for it. You have the arrows for the minions. You have the fireball for the Mother Witch, so you need to figure out everything else. You have the recruits there to deal with the Mini P.E.K.K.A. The biggest thing is that Goblin Giant up front, the Rage behind. That's kind of your kryptonite, right? So how do you stop that? Well, I mean, obviously, if you see there in the numbers, it's more of a 50-50 matchup. That means it's not impossible, not even maybe that hard to do if you're doing it correctly. And it just feels like in both of those situations that Kyurem just overextends, just not thinking maybe 5 steps ahead, maybe just thinking the 3 steps ahead. Again, I don't know what he does differently in that first game. If you can't get on top of the baby dragons, it is really tough. But I do think in that second game, it was just a little bit of more desperation play, even though you do get the reset. That's the other thing about best of 3s. You know, people that live in these best of 3s and at the highest level of competition, Rich, they're okay to go down one game. They don't love it, but they're used to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the critical things, right, is thinking about the whole match as opposed to the one right in front of you. When you have limited competitive experience, like Kyurem does, not very much competitive experience at all. How many BO3s are you playing? How many are you playing in a dual mode format? How often are you actually thinking about that deck picking as time goes on? Deck picking is an art when you talk about dual mode, whether you're playing Royale Masters dual mode or you're playing normal duels, right? Either way, there's an art and a bit of a science to it as well. It requires knowing, A, when certain, like, when cards are out, what you should actually be going for, but then also be combining that with good opposition research. Those two things coming together.
Yes.
And Ta's been doing that for 3 years, and Kyurem's been doing that sometimes, occasionally, maybe. Very big difference.
Yeah. So let's take a look here at the bracket for those 4 players that have been able to put it all together. We're about to take a very short break here before we get into what Rich just said. We got our final 4, the semis, Sandbox and Ta, and Adnan and Mo Light. I mean, honestly, Rich, when you looked at the 16 to start our day, there's only a couple pieces missing here. I mean, I guess you could have swapped Morton in or Wallace in, but either way, not a lot of surprises here in our final 4. Really excited to get into that in just a minute. And like you said, that deck picking is really going to have to come through, as is that patience. We'll see you guys in just another 3 to 5 minutes, I think is what it is, right here after the break here on Royal Masters.
And welcome back to Royale Masters, our second half of today's broadcast. We started with 16 players. We are down to just the final 4 on their way to glory, gold, aka money, and of course some points towards our final for this season's competition. Andrew, it's been a whole lot of fun so far, but no big surprises here. The GOAT in the top 4.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you look at the players that are here, we said it right before the break. I think you could have swapped in Wallace or Morton here in the top 4, and you would have been, you wouldn't have been as surprised in the same sense if any of those two were out, other than I feel like Mohamed Light, right? It felt like Mo really does just make it to the finals in every competition he's in. I think that's, again, you talk about the level of his greatness, it is a surprise when he doesn't win things. It's really a surprise when he doesn't just make it to the finals at least, right?
Sure.
Just that alone, it feels like he makes like 90% of the finals in the tournaments he goes to.
That's about right. I mean, again, we've talked about this ad nauseum. Nobody should be doing that. He's doing that, and we'll have one more very important tournament in November to see just is it completely insanity? Is it even stoppable? Right. What do we even do? Do we rename the game? Who knows? But what we have in front of us is trainer Adnan, who can join a list of people who in the last couple of months have found some cracks in the armor. Right? Whether it be Samuel Basoto at CRL season, our 6th monthly final, whether it be Clown, a.k.a. Kickash, last month, people have been finding little opportunities to take kind of important wins off of Mohamed Light.
Absolutely, and we've seen great success from Adnan throughout this year. We've seen him take first place in Royale Masters in King of the Hill. We've seen him Adnan is just like, what is
Can we pull that
right
for
now?
a replay, please, Tasty?
And while I was singing his praises, he loses half of his tower. He also got first place in our summer Clash triple draft here. So he's had a lot of success with Royale Masters this year alone, and not a lot of success in this game to start.
Yeah, what an interesting pick here. Arrow, Zap, Jebus. Jebus cooking in this matchup.
Dude, what is this deck?
Arrow, is it MK? Is this like a different version of the Minor Prince MK deck?
He's just like playing it backwards.
Right? Well, you think about this too, is if this is MK in here as the final card, that we talk about kind of old school minor decks and the ability to play, whether it's with Lava Hound or with Loon or whatever, but the ability to use that zap to reset, to retarget, and get a ton of extra damage out of things. So if this is MK, you can send a miner in, and then bring the MK on, retarget with a zap, get the miner some more damage, or vice versa, back and forth, over and over again. Dog and cats living together, pure hysteria, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, this deck is a weird one for sure. And, Mo with the arrows and the zap has been surgical with them. You see this is going to almost take the tower. Yeah, I mean, there you go. Firecracker at the bridge, no elixir in the tank. Adnan already knows it's over, and you got to just kind of chalk this one up as a horrible start to an even worse finish here for Adnan. And, yeah, I'm curious what that last card is. It feels like with Royal Ghost and Prince, it's got to be something other than MK, but Rich, it still would make sense just to, he's had no reason to play it, and just the last thing to add on to your note of the zap is like, yeah, zap is like not used at all, so you forget how brutal it can be sometimes. Yeah,
I mean, we'll take a look at that opening arrows to ruin your dreams play at the beginning, but Adnan is just, you see, he's just laughing. He's just like, dude, why? What? Please.
Yeah, like, what are you doing to me? I thought we were playing fair here.
I thought we were friends. Turns out not. You're not invited to my birthday party.
Yeah, Mo is not friends with anyone when it comes to competition there. A very dominant Game 1 victory, and I'm excited to go back and look at that replay just because I was looking at Adnan's stats and all the great things he's done this year, and I look back over and he's lost his tower, basically.
And just on top of that, Mo arrow zaps the evolved firecracker at the end just to punctuate the victory. And it was Mega Knight in there, so it's a luminary variation. Doesn't end up even needing the Mega Knight in here. Arrows end up absolutely carrying, and this was very, very nice.
Yeah, it's just like minor minions. You use your only response. Let's take a look here at the replay.
Yeah.
Rich, I think you were watching a little bit more closely than me. Please break it down.
I do watch very closelier sometimes than you do, and here we go. The counter push, you take some hog shots, Miner goes into the back because you're not against NATO. The Firecracker turns the wrong way, and you're like, oh, that Firecracker, bad direction, and it predicts the Ice Spirit too. And then watch the Valk not pick up and walk back behind for a ton of damage, and that's where the wow is from Adnan. He was like, dude, those minions shouldn't have done all the stuff. And the Miner just lasted a little bit too long.
I mean, look, it's always rough when that moment happens in a competition because, so many people are watching, money's on the line, but like we've all had those games where every interaction is just off and wrong. And I don't know if you ever do this, but I'm like, I'll literally be playing the game and I'm like, what is happening right now? Like my cards aren't carding. And I'm like, I just need to, this 5 minutes needs to be gone. Josh always calls it double tap swipe. Let's get this game off my phone. Let me sit back because every single thing that could have gone wrong there for Adnan went wrong. Why didn't I go higher with the Firecracker? Because it doesn't make sense. I can't get a counter push. Let's get down lower. Oh, you're going to bait out a spell? Well, I have the Valkyrie up front just in case the tank. Nothing goes right. Ice Spirit's there. Well, it gets pre-aired off the board. Let's just go to game number 2 if we're Adnan. Mo having fun in that one.
Yeah, and I just messaged Jeb as I'm like, stop, dude, zap. And just as I was looking at Adnan's deck pool, and I saw he's been playing a lot of the cycle decks with bats, especially that minor wall breaker cycle with bats. And just as I was looking that up, Jeb has messaged me back. He was like, for cycle snipes. So there you go. Very nice to put that one in there.
I mean, and that's why it really it makes sense in every sport, everything. Whether you're a professional violinist or a professional basketball player, you have a coach. And I think finally with, the last few years of Clash going to dual modes, it feels like coaches have gotten, the praise that they've always kind of deserved. It felt like coaches only got praised if they won CRL West or East or World Finals. And now it feels like even when people don't win things, when you see their coaches come through, obviously Jebba is an exception because he works with Mo, but there's other coaches out there in the world like Julesy, other analysts out there, Winwoo and stuff, who have all kind of started to make names for themselves because you see how important it really is. And, I'm going to throw in Zap because he likes to play bats. Look at this matchup. GG.
Yeah, and you're talking about coaches here. There are 4 players left, and there are 3 coaches in the clan right now. So you have Mohammed with Jebez, as we just saw. Ta is with Tight, who's been a big-time coach for a lot of the Japanese pros. And then, this is a fun one, for our last semifinalist, Sandbox. He's playing...
Is he with SB?
He's working with SB, right? So the rise, as Jules called it yesterday, the rise of the UK coaches, SB getting in the mix.
Yeah, and a lot of great names there in terms of coaching. Really, really, and you look at our Final Four, it makes a lot of sense. And when you look at Adnan, maybe I'm not going to say he needs a coach. I just say maybe that's his next investment. Yeah.
At the moment, he's holding on because keep in mind this deck from Mohammed Light doesn't run a building, so he's going to have to make some good choices on stopping these Royal Hog connections, and obviously a big one already, not to mention that little Firecracker to add some damage there on that left-hand lane, so pretty even as we get through the first 2.
And Rem Ryder, the win condition of choice here from Mo Light as he resets with some recruits in the back. Going to take a couple hog shots here again.
Yeah, and this is just the challenge that we've seen in this deck, and it's interesting. I mean, this deck has been very popular today, but it's really been facing these hog matches that are difficult over and over again.
Yeah, and you got the Valkyrie up there. Valkyrie, she's not been super popular, but here she is here today showing up in fashion. Really nice heal spirit for Mohammed Light to deal with that Valkyrie and get his troops that second leg of this push, and that's really it. I mean, once again, Mo Light looks at the matchup, looks at the response. He goes, I'm going to pile up at the bridge. You have one good way to deal with this. It's going to be a Valkyrie up high. I get that heal spirit perfectly timed. GG, well played again. And this is why, not only do you find yourself in great matchups when you are Mohammed Light, and you can play them perfectly.
And that right there is what nobody was really doing in these matchups earlier today, using the Ram Rider's snare to slow the Hogs so they don't touch tower. And that we saw from Mohamed Light there at the end, and maybe a key element that other players weren't utilizing in this matchup earlier today.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, Mo just doing Mo things, making it look really, really easy against a really solid player in trainer Adnan. But you know, that push on the left-hand side, you had a Mother Witch behind 3 recruits with skeleton dragons, and I believe, yeah, and then you get the Heal Spirit, and then you get the Lumberjack, and then you get the Bar Barrel. So it's not even that it wasn't a perfectly orchestrated push, just pile everything up at the bridge. It was still timed out perfectly. He knew the Valkyrie was going to come out for the recruits and the Mother Witch, so there's no reason to drop the Lumberjack or the Barb Barrel or the Heal Spirit into that. You slow play the Heal Spirit, then you get your ground troops to come and swarm. Beautifully, beautifully put together by Mo there, and Adnan just has to sit back and lose his tower and then try to get back on the offense. Then that snare comes in, Rich. Just easy pickings for Mo.
And we do have Mo moving on, but keep in mind that trainer Adnan can still play in the 3rd place match to get himself more money and more points towards our final later this year. So Adnan out, but not all the way out. We get a little bit more of him before the day is over.
Yeah, and when you get to our last matchup here in the semis, it does feel like Sandbox has been kind of firing on all cylinders today. Yep. I think earlier you said it felt like you wouldn't be surprised, I think, if you said it was Mo and Sandbox, and I'm kind of in the same boat here. Obviously, there's still one more match to be had against a very, very good opponent, but Sandbox has been doing a lot of things very, very correctly today, and, you know, that's the Sandbox we like to see. We're not going to see him at World Finals this year, you know, and Sandbox is always, you know, hard on himself when he doesn't perform at the highest level, but you can still see he's just right there. I mean, he was right outside of getting to that World Finals, getting that golden ticket.
Yeah, just absolutely kind of devastatingly close. Sandbox finishing 23rd overall, so you take that 7 out from the golden ticket winners. And he was just just one good month away from making it through on points, and he'll have to regroup for next year in 2024. Hopefully he makes it out to World Finals anyway to hang. Always a fun guy to be around.
Yeah, and then you talk about being close, Rich. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Ta was one person away.
Yes, ended up being very close to make it to World Finals this year.
So Ta was a person that felt like they had some glimmering moments early on in their career, then had a lot of naysayers, and then here in 2023, it feels like has really shown, look, I'm here to stay. Maybe I got, you know, a great fortune when I won that monthly final, but it wasn't luck. It was just what you have to have when you want to play at the highest level and win at the highest level. You got to have that skill, and you got to have a little bit of luck. So Ta looks like he ended in 15th, right behind everyone else. If you know, if you can stomach that, it's okay. You got a bright 2024 ahead of you.
Yeah, very true indeed. And here we go. You wanted to go to the skies. You kind of say it's being underutilized, getting into the aerial attack, and here we go with what I think is going to be Lava Loon Miner, not just Miner Loon.
Yeah, it should be, at least, when you talk about that Inferno and those Skelly Drags. But, you know, Sandbox actually having a lot of good responses. You got the Mother Witch deal with, you know, the pups, spawn some piggies off them, the Skeleton Dragons, so you have that Fireball bait aspect or the big spell bait aspect of where do you drop it. And then, of course, the Goblin Gang. Goblin Gang is great. You can always play it early on. You get a little bit of ground pressure, then the Spears behind to help bait out that spell. So we'll see here as Toss sets up a Lava in the back, and Sandbox does the appropriate thing by setting up his heaviest card in the back as well.
So here we go, 3-3 split. Good dual lane damage from both players. And let's see what Todd does about the Mother Witch here. The Skelly King goes to the wrong side, doesn't get the pickup on the Miner. And that's just a guessing game sometimes. Where's that Miner going to go? Onto the troop you're protecting.
Should be a Fireball here to push everything back. And Fireball comes in, does well, but Balloon still gets a shot, and the Goblin Gang has to come out opposite lane to stop the Evoed Barbs. Evoed Barbs really do great work against the Evoed recruits, and it looks like Sandbox is going to probably drop game number 1. Haven't seen a lot of lava here today, and it looks like we're going to finally see it with some good success.
Yeah, and that defense against the Balloon is one that people kind of get caught by a lot, because they're so hoping to get the full Fireball value. This could take the tower back to the direction. Can he get enough out of the way? No, not quite. they're so focused on making sure they get full fireball value and get both the pups and the loon that they really don't focus on the more important thing, which is the pups you can pick up again. But the loon, you have to knock back and get DPS down in time to not take those shots. And that's a really common mistake we're seeing people make throughout this year, and one that you really cannot be making against this deck.
Yeah, and clearly I've been watching some Mohamed Light gameplay on his channel, because I think another thing that just happened in his most recent video was he talked about poisoning the board, right? He's like, I'm poisoning right here. I know it's not getting on Princess Tower, but I really want to make sure that it gets the full value on top of the the encroaching units. And that's exactly what you're talking about here, man. If he just holds 1 second longer on that fireball, he gets the balloon pushback a little bit better. He's still able to pick up most of the pups with that. Yeah. You can still get a tank down in front, and then maybe you find yourself in a situation where your opponent has to send in one more balloon push, right? Maybe that's that is the best case scenario. And I agree. It felt like, we knew the fireball was going to come down. It's easy to call that on broadcast, but it's about when it comes down. And it felt like it did come down just a hair too early.
It's the hair too early is one option. Another option is just make sure that you're getting the knockback the right direction, right? That knocked to the side, not to the back. And what's your list of priorities? You can hold a little bit longer and try to get everything together. You can also just make sure that the biggest threat is taken care of first, and making neither decision ends up meaning you don't have both of your towers.
Yeah, and you know what? I like it. I like that we're going there, that we went to the skies there in that first game. It's something, like I said, we hadn't seen a lot of here today. And I do think that at the end of the day, you end up using some cards that are pretty popular in the meta, but there's still a lot of those big major meta decks that are still very available. And I think that this deck is a little bit more dominant than maybe some of those mortar decks we were talking about before, right? Those decks don't use a lot of overlap. They actually use a lot of the similar cards here in the Skeleton King, the Skelly Dragons, the Goblins, and the Miner, but it feels like maybe this is the deck, or this deck, at least in this instance, is maybe a little bit more dominant, and it has been a little bit more dominant.
And that's some of the choices you have to make, get to something more dominant in that moment. And as we talk about domination, Ta really doing a great job just kind of taking advantage of what Sandbox has been struggling with this year, which is decision-making, right? And he chose a deck here that forces good decision-making. When you're playing against big beat-down decks, micro ends up being less of the conversation, and macro becomes a bigger part of the conversation. And the people think that might be a micro decision problem, that a micro play problem with what Sandbox did there. But I think what we talked about before, I think it was more of a macro problem. He didn't know what decision he wanted to make and made it too late.
And that was kind of like a mix of two decks also, that Sandbox deck. It was like a mix of the Royal Recruits Wallbreakers spam deck and a mix of the Royal Recruits Skeleton King Mortar deck. So it felt like that was also, I think I messed up a little bit of my analysis there in talking about the cards, because it does feel like it was a crossover between those two, whereas the one that Ta ran is just like firmly what it is, and people all know what that deck is. So here we go. Game number 2, Sandbox going back to the well. Here in terms of, those 5 cards were in the last game. I don't know if this is the right way to go, but we'll find out.
And again, playing a little fast and loose with the opening attack. NATO's still available, and he just gave a really easy opportunity for a King Tower activation, which against minor wall breakers is going to make things harder.
Yeah, and this is maybe some of the stuff that was the reason that Sandbox just fell right outside of that World Finals berth, is just, some of the decision making and maybe the deck choice just feel a little bit off, but still, it's very early on. He's got that connection on the left hand side to make it so that he's within striking range or within just a few HP. We shall see.
And so one more time, this drill deck, and the Mother Witch does have an okay target on the drill. You have the Skeleton King to counter the drill as well. Controlling this Xe up high is going to be really important for Sandbox.
Yeah, it's and I think a big part of that sometimes is going to have to be your Skeleton King, because the NATO ability to pull everything in front of that tower is really interesting. So instead he goes Skeleton King to defend and recruits behind. Okay, I like that, actually. That's actually a better decision. Skeleton King has the nice splash damage. The recruits can't be NATO'd forward. And nice clean defense there from Sandbox.
this deck gets back to Executioner so fast. Executioner and Bomb Tower both can get out there so consistently. And the Miner goes to clear the defenses, but Exy does its job of getting everything off here, and poisons are going to start coming out, and here you go.
Yeah, and that is why you're going to want to see Sandbox using that Skeleton King as the cleanup for the drill a lot, and then getting the recruits down up high. If he can continue to have that sequence happen, it's going to be good for him, but obviously Ta recognizes that and slow plays things, so now we see the recruits come down in the back. And then if we do get an aggressive drill, this becomes interesting for the tank up high.
And a good poison there to get recruits and Mother Witch. This Exy getting tons of value. He's going to stay on the board a little bit longer. This might be... Yeah, and there you go. Great prediction there by Sandbox. He knew that that NATO play was coming. It was the play to make, and he put that Miner in the exact right spot.
Yeah, really, really well done. Ta, there's only one tank that can come down. There's only a couple units that can come down. They're all NATOable unless you send it behind and on the bridge. Absolutely the only decision that could be made there. 2024 now to 2031 with Ta still in the lead.
Miner to the outside. Wall breakers trying to get on through. Bomb Tower, Fire Spirit, plus NATO will all take care of that one fairly easily.
And the 2-4 split now has been the preference the last couple times. Obviously baits out the poison in the healthier of the two lanes. Then the Mother Witch has free reign to go, but it's about being able to actually break through on the right-hand side.
And Sandbox is being forced to spend miners defensively to win these bridge fights against the Exy, which means that the most likely way of him getting meaningful damage on the tower is out. So now he has to hope that he can find a big way to overwhelm here in these final moments. Can he do something to break through? Fireball on the left-hand side. Miner now going to finally go. He's still trying to get the Exy out. Miner's trying to be a tech card and not a damage dealer, and I just don't know if he's going to get that from this.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult because all these cards that you see Sandbox wanting to use offensively are unavailable. He needs to use the Skeleton Dragons to try to get on top of that Bomb Tower, but then they get NATO'd to one side. The Miner has to keep coming out defensively, or else the Executioner lines up like that. And just really, really clean 2-0 there by Ta. Sandbox playing a little bit out of sorts. And honestly, Rich, I think part of it just comes back to that deck. It's that deck is not... It's not that it's not viable, it's just that it feels like I said, two decks kind of mishmashed into one. You're either missing that mortar for the siege, or you're missing the additional spam from the wall breakers deck that you normally get with either the spears or the bats or whatever on top. It just, yeah, this deck just feels a little bit off in terms of its synergy.
Yeah, and you look at this, the Mother Witch just really not having a phenomenal target, and Sandbox did his best to try to get it in the mix, but you look at Ta's deck here, and the Knight, the Executioner, not going to get it very much, and the Fire Spirit going to jump before you can turn it most of the time. So really, you're either hoping to win a bridge fight and turn the Knight or Exy into one single pig, or you're using the Mother Witch against the Drill, which isn't very many pigs either. So she ends up being kind of a dead card in this matchup overall, and you know, I think that maybe the expectation from Sandbox and SB was that we were going to see a little more baity cards, maybe something more cycle out of Ta in this game, but instead, Ta just goes to this NATO Exy Drill control and shuts things down.
Yeah, and you look at this deck, it is, you know, obviously on the UC leaderboard, it's up to 3,000 trophies. It's been used 1,600 times, which in terms of wall breaker decks out there, it's pretty low, right? When you talk about usage and the actual amount that it's been played, you know, obviously the Remy Ellie deck has been paid, you know, close to like 10,000 or something like that. So it is obviously a viable deck. Like we said, it just feels like there was just maybe not the best matchups. And also, like I said, it just doesn't feel like the best option with all those cards. Either way, great run here for Sandbox. It comes to a quick end with Ta, but he still has that third place match. Let's take a look here at the bracket as we're talking through it. We got our finals, Rich, and we got our third place match set up.
We have a third place match, and this is an interesting one because this third place match isn't just trainer Adnan versus Sandbox. I just found out that it's actually SB versus Julesy in terms of a coaching deck picking matchup. So we have four phenomenal coaches here in our semifinals, and now our third place match and our grand championship match. Again, we will get to the Mohamed Light Ta matchup here in just a little bit, but first, trainer Adnan versus Sandbox and I don't know if we can take a look at the prize pool here, because This is going to be for a little bit of cash and, of course, points towards our final later. Here we go. So third place, $500. Fourth place, $300. So a $200 best of 3 incoming between these two players and these two coaches.
Yeah, $200, 2 points there, which really matters when you want to get to those finals. And obviously not going to be able to get in that first or second place spot. So this third place, that $500, not a bad way to spend your Sunday. Both guys kind of got dominated in their semifinals. They both went 0-2, and it felt like both those sets were really, really one-sided. Adnan's almost felt like it was because of the deck picking from Mohamed Light on top of the gameplay, right? You can't ever ignore that part. Whereas it felt like Sandbox and Ta, it just felt like Sandbox, when we talked about how good he was throughout the rest of today, it feels like it's almost like someone else picked up his phone for that one set. He just was not making as aggressive plays. He wasn't playing as methodical. It felt like leading up to it, he knew exactly when to hit the brakes and when to hit the gas. In that set, it just felt like he was kind of out of sorts.
Well, we talked about this top of show, right? You have to win 4 matches. You have to win 8 games. You just have to have consistency over the course of that little run. And the biggest killer is, do you have some moments of inconsistency? Can you maintain that through all of those matches? And that's what makes championship runs in any competition, is do you put it all together on game day?
Yeah, and here I want to take a look at the on my end, I wanted to look at the actual matchup conversation with that deck that Sandbox was running, just because, like I said, it's not the most popular version that has those cards in it, and it felt like both times it really struggled. You look at the matchup here with 7 cards, there's only 16 instances, and it's a 60-40. You look at the other, like with all 8 cards, it's 100-0, but there's only a couple samples there. In the first matchup, Sandbox technically had, they say, the advantage, but I don't know exactly about that. Much closer to 50-50, but here we go. Third place match, and Sandy changing things up as he busts out bowling.
Ooh, is this a little bowler loon freeze maybe in this one? That's a fascinating choice, as Adnan goes, hey, you just got busted up by this drill XE NATO deck, let's do it one more time.
Yeah, and there you go. Gets the King Tower activation in early on. XE still has a lot of HP, going to require a response. Good start for Adnan.
Yeah, you're up against XE, NATO, Ice Spirit, Bomb Tower. Is this a rip?
Feels a little bit like it.
Yeah.
We'll see if Sandy can somehow play through it. We have seen Bowler Loon Freeze do some crazy stuff in the past, but tough matchup. I mean,
this just cycles so quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And the Bowler Loon Freeze deck is one of the heavier Loon decks in terms of without lava. So anyway, we'll see as he goes Naked Loon opposite lane as the bowler works down the left-hand side.
One wrinkle in this one, or let's call it 2, but one major wrinkle in this one is that Sandbox probably has NATO, which is making the minor damage a little bit harder for Trainer Adnan. So it might just take a few of these death damages to make this a pretty good matchup for Sandbox once we get past this single and double elixir periods.
Yeah, and just to add to your point, Rich, I think that once we get into those periods of double and triple, you're going to be able to use units to pick up the minor to get a strong counter push, and then you'll start to get to use that NATO freeze offensively or coupled with your bowler to get offensive boulder damage on your towers. So a pretty good situation for Sandbox to be in. Not down a lot of damage, clearly has the heavier deck. Adnan does have that King Tower activated, but here we go. This is what you want to see more of, is that heavy card dual lane pressure.
I'm wondering about why the minor pick instead of the drill pick here. You're not saving minor for something else. Drill does add you another building, which would be nice here, obviously. But drill would have been also cool here just to be a little bit not as easily counterable on the side of Sandbox with the NATO specifically. But here we go. This time bowler not ready to pick up the minor. Minor's gonna get some good chip damage. XE should turn here. No, instead the Inferno Dragon comes out high. That's a lot on the board for Adnan to contend with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really nice high Inferno there from Adnan. Really well-placed Inferno and a really well-placed Executioner here. So the NATO's going to pull it away. That's a nice NATO. Not going to get a drop, but will get more death damage. And as you were talking about a little bit ago, Rich, maybe that is just the only way Sandbox can actually win this game is just that death damage. And then you add in the spell damage at the end of the Loon, or excuse me, of the Freeze and the NATO. But obviously that's not very much.
Well, there was the death damage, but also he pulled the XE into bowler lineup and got that left-hand tower down to 2130. So did a nice job of kind of double dipping on that NATO, which, hey, the more value you get, that, you get 5 elixir value out of a 3 elixir NATO. Nicely done.
Yeah. What do they say? The key to victory is using elixir efficiently.
That's what I've been told by the game many times.
So here we go. Evo Knight plus Loon Push on the right-hand side. You got that Inferno over the middle looking for the bomb tower. Exi comes down. Now the Freeze. Now most likely a NATO and a late bomb tower. There it is. But still, that's a lot of health on the board.
That is going to be death damage one more time, having to control this Inferno Dragon. But now Bowler with the Loon behind. Yeah. Yep.
That's it. And there's the NATO to line up the Loon. So he does get the Inferno off, but now the Xy's right up front. Wow, body blocks the Bowler with the Knight and does get this bomb tower down. So, bleeding out, but still alive is Trainer Adnan.
Oh, and now he has to get aggressive because, again, he's playing a chip deck behind against this Bowler Loon Freeze. The NATO prediction from Sandbox to not let the XE lineup happen. That could be the one that seals it here. Loon to the right-hand side. Adnan has to control. Needs to get bomb tower down to pull. Miner goes to the back, trying to avoid, and the defensive freeze comes in. But will the Miner stay up? No, poison down. Can he stop the balloon from touching?
Does the tick come in? The tick's gonna come in, Rich.
Oh my word! Trainer Adnan just steals that one in the final second, 64 HP. GG, well played.
The panic defense from Trainer Adnan on that right-hand side ends up working out. So well done with so much coming your way. The double freezes, the double NATOs, the double Loons, all of it coming down, a Bowler in the back. And that's actually really, really well played there by Sandbox as well. I guess in terms of not using that Electro Dragon, there's not a lot of good targets for it. It's pretty expensive. It's easily controllable. And it felt like, having that, I don't know. I was going to, the other part of it is that his cycle seemed a little funky there throughout. His cycle really did seem odd a couple times. Not sure if that's the exact way to go, but really what's more impressive is the fact that it felt like Adnan was completely overwhelmed and he was able to get out of it and stay alive with that defense.
Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the closing moments from that really exciting game as our players prepare their decks for game number 2. And, this is a pretty big lead for Sandbox at this point, and he just gets kind of caught here. This miner gets some damage because of the NATO. No XE lineup, but now poison value in, and suddenly things get very tight.
Yeah, the double NATO there is really, really nice. 12-15 remains. We got the Loon coming across the board here. The Barb getting tanked for, so the Loon is actually doing the tanking here. Then you get the high bomb tower, and it felt like the freeze might be enough. The problem is that freeze maybe needed to be used on the other side of the board. If you freeze the King Tower and the Princess Tower there, maybe, just maybe, you're able to get that bomb drop in. It's hard to say, obviously, because we're looking at a photo finish, the decision-making in that moment. Does the Miner get another shot anyway and you still lose? Who knows? I think the biggest thing is the fact that Adnan was able to survive that insane push, and now it looks like he might be going to some version of Fireball bait. And the first time we're seeing Flying Machine today, and it's met with a Monk for the first time today as well. So interesting pull there on both sides.
Yeah, good timing to pull the Monk out, which, like I said, we don't see as much, probably the second or third most used of the champions at the moment. It is wild how much champions just really aren't used now that we're in the evolutions meta. And I think a lot of it is that most of the champions are mini tanks, and most of the evolutions take the slot that a mini tank would occupy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, we used to, and we've seen people try to couple the champion with the strong Evo to get that 3-card cycle going, but whatever that code is, it hasn't quite been cracked yet. We're seeing it a little bit more now with the Skeleton King plus whatever else, the Knight or the Recruits. But, we saw Ruben try it in our last monthly finals, or I should say the second to last monthly finals, and we've seen it here at Royal Masters that was actually just Royal Masters last weekend. We saw that with Ruben quite a bit. Was just like, it felt like he was trying to force the issue. And I do believe that there's a way to get both going. I just don't know what that combo is.
So Sandbox getting a nice little lead here, and Cage out of cycle. I don't think he goes back to the Hog here yet, but he knows the Cage isn't available. Does he, as we get up to 10 here, go with the Hog in front of this Electro Spirit? No, just cycles the E-Spirit and some cycle cards, sucks out the arrows, and then goes Hogs into the Evolved Recruits.
And then an Evoed Firecracker comes down. She's going to do a good job there. Wow, interesting. You saw the idea there. Sandbox maybe just a hair late on it. The timing on that probably very difficult to pull off, but maybe that monk overspend actually ends up hurting him here. How is he going to deal with this push?
Yeah, I don't know. He did overspend a lot. Yeah, you can't play the monk reactively. It cannot protect. It can't drop and activate quickly enough. So you have to sequence that a little bit differently. And Sandbox just not quite getting it done. He's going to try to put a Hog behind this monk, get some reflection, and get this tower down. And that's a dirty, dirty Cage. 12 seconds left. Can he sneak the Hog through all this? Monk doing some reflection. Hog trying to sneak through. Goblins doing some tanking. Firecracker trying to do enough.
Timing.
Needs to get a couple of shots. Not going to do it. GG. Well played. Trainer Adnan holds on and wins third place here at Royale Masters' second qualifier.
That Cage couldn't have been more perfectly timed because it was almost like Sandbox anticipated it, but I don't think he anticipated the clock running out, right? If there was just 1 to 2 more seconds there, Sandbox could have at least tied the tower situation up. But Adnan doing a great job recognizing the time, recognizing the win condition, goes, all right, if I get the Cage down, you need to worry about the Cage first. That'll take you 3 seconds. That 3 seconds could be enough for me to win the game. 2 games in a row where Sandbox was not able to use one of his cards. Both times that card cost 5 elixir. Inferno Dragon game number 2, Inferno Tower game number 2, Electro Dragon game number 1. I don't know if that actually matters, but it's at least something to note. The matchup there, though, does matter. 6 of 8, and it's very, very heavily in favor of Trainer Adnan.
Yeah, and that's just one of those things where it's so frustrating when you find a card that doesn't just, when you don't play a card, it doesn't just mean that you didn't use it, it wasn't useful. It takes up spot in your cycle, it takes up spots in your hands, and just makes everything awkward. You're sitting there looking at it. You have 3 options to play instead of 4 the entire game. It's disruptive. And most of the time, if someone wins without playing one of their cards, it's because they had one push early that blew someone out of the water early on, and hey, I was playing Golem and I had a big counter push that went down and I never had to play Golem, right? That's usually when that was the other 90% of the time when someone doesn't play a card, it's they get kind of like hand-locked like that and don't have an opportunity to actually get it involved.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the biggest thing about those, even at the end of game 1, I was talking about the Electro Dragon. Does it need to come down? Does it not? Either way, it's just about your cycle, and I think you're 100% correct there. It just makes playing your deck, and especially a deck like that, when you talk about everything there being pretty cheap other than the Inferno being a great way to kind of help reset, get back to 10, kind of control the board for a moment so you can figure out your next push. Just didn't have that luxury throughout that game or throughout that entire set. So well done to Adnan and to Sandbox there as we head to our finals now. Mohamed Light finds himself back in the finals. No surprise, at least in terms of that happening, because he does it all the time. But as we take a look here at the bracket, remember last week, Mo did go the distance in the finals against Kickash or Clown, but was not able to take home the gold. Ta looking to be upset once again here in our Open Qualifier 2.
And look, this is the interesting thing, right, is that Mohamed Light back here again. Ta certainly has been live today. Ta, working with his coach Tight, they have been on it today with their gameplay and their picks. Mohamed Light, obviously you're going to give him the advantage going into pretty much any matchup ever. But with 2 finals performances back-to-back, he's pretty much locked in his spot in the finals here for Royale Masters, our grand final event. And while the prize pool here, it's some real money, the big thing you want is to go win that championship later in the year.
Oh yeah. That playoff prize pool is a lot of fun. And remember, you guys can still be in the playoffs. There's still one more open qualifier and our last chance qualifier. We got basically where we're at now, not an entire month left of this traditional version of Royale Masters, but pretty dang close before we get to the end of the run. So make sure you guys are following on all the places that are Royale Masters. As Rich says, it's MSTRS if you're wondering why you can't find it, but easily found in the description there. Discord is the best place to be for all the information, Twitter as well for all of the, kind of news flashes that come out about when to sign up and what's going on and who's winning the tournaments. And honestly, if you play well, you will see yourself shouted out on their Twitter and on the Esports Royale Twitter, most likely. So it's all cool. It's all a great way to start building a name for yourself in the scene, or if you already have a name for yourself, stack that cash, man. I mean, you see today, $6,000 for a Sunday, not bad. Walking away with 2,400 winning this thing, pretty good day. Pretty good way to end your week, or start, depending on.
Yeah, I mean, either way, however you take, whether you put Sunday as the first day of the week or the last day of the week,
Where do
either
you
way,
put it?
Yom Rishon, it's day number 1. It's the first. It's the
day
first
number
day of the
one.
week.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah. See, for me, I've always put it as the last day of the week for some reason. I don't know why, but who knows? Here we go. This is it. Our finals. Rich, if Ta pulls this off, I will be very, very impressed, especially if it doesn't, like, if he somehow hits 1, 2, 3, that'll blow my mind. But I almost feel like it's more difficult in game number 5 here for Tite and Ta, because how well Mo comes out. It was really impressive and that's why, you had Kickash working with Jebas as well. I don't think he was sniping Mo to like make a news headline there. I feel like he's probably got a little bit more loyalty than that. But if you talk about coach versus coach, Jebas has been here before.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's been here more than just about any coach at this point, and it's certainly a good spot for him. But Tite is no slouch. Tite has been in the mix of the top coaches in the game, and you're playing with a player as talented as Ta, who kind of burst onto the scene in 2021 in a way where I remember when Ta won that monthly final, we were all kind of skeptical, and he's done a really good job the last couple of years of proving us wrong for that skepticism. So certainly a live matchup here, and keep in mind we are going best of 5. Because the Royale Masters dual format allows you to not have to burn 4 decks and be trying to cobble together a 5th from whatever detritus has slipped through to the end. You only lose the cards that you win with, so it does allow us to go full BO5, and I love it.
And I love the idea of coming out with, like, MK, Prince, Mega Knight, never mind, it's already Evo Knight in both directions. So my point, though, was that I want to see a little bit weird in game number 1, because you have no idea what the landscape is going to look like moving forward. But maybe both these guys going, I want to win in 3, as they're coming out with, well, at least Mo goes right on meta. Phoenix plus Knight, a little bit less popular.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm looking through what Ta's been playing lately, and I'm not seeing Phoenix anywhere in his last week of gameplay, so trying to mix things up a bit, as you should do against Mohamed Light.
And there it is, Rich. He kind of gets what we're talking about in terms of, I think, trying to go to a version of Graveyard Splash Yard with the mix-in of the Phoenix. But, Mo Light is right back to a deck that matches up pretty well. Lightning comes in, Phoenix on the tower already, and I gotta tell you, I'm not tired of it, but sometimes, Mo, you just make it look too easy, man. That much damage in already. This is going to be a pretty clean defense. There's no tank there for the Skellies, and that splash damage from the Hunter, not only is it going to do a good job cleaning up the Skellies, but look at the work it puts in on that Phoenix. That's why he's the goated one.
And for those of you who are joining us from the in-game feature for this matchup, and maybe you don't know all the details here, that Hunter placement, the inside front corner of the tower, is kind of the common Hunter placement against Graveyard. You saw it bolstered by the Barb Barrel as well, but if you are in a situation with a deck like this one against Graveyard, that is where you want to be putting that Hunter.
Yeah, it's good to have over 500 of you guys joining us over on YouTube for this finals here between the best player in Clash Royale and the best player in Clash Royale in 1 month back in 2021.
And then you ask the question, hey, Rich, if that Hunter placement was the best one, why did Mo switch to the bottom corner? Because he didn't want the Hunter to turn and focus on the Knight. He wanted it to keep working against those skeletons spawned by the Graveyard.
So here we go. Mo gets another Goblin Giant in, goes Bar Barrel over the middle. Now distraction's going to have to come down for the Sparky. It is the Tombstone. And a very clean defense there by Ta. Mo probably feeling a little bit of pressure now, going, wow, I'm now down in damage. I'm going up against a deck that starts to favor much, much better as this game gets deeper in double and triple elixir. And having to use the Goblin Giant giving splash damage there to that Ice Wizard. This is trouble for Mo right now.
Yeah, this isn't easy for him. I mean, of all the different Goblin Giant variations, this is a one that's going to have maybe some of the most trouble against Graveyard.
Yeah.
And
misses the Rage, misses the arrows, misses the Mother Witch. Sorry to cut you off. Misses the minions.
Yep, exactly. And going triple spell here, which is also, I didn't even think about that. This is Goblin Giant Sparky triple spell?
And spells that don't do great against Graveyard, right?
Yes.
You don't have the arrows, the rage, or the poison. It feels like those are probably the best. Snowball is okay. Bar Barrel is pretty good, but yeah, those other ones are a lot nicer to have. Luckily there for Mo, though, the Knight isn't walking, so the Sparky Shot actually comes in, and this Bar Barrel is in front. Can the other Evo Knight get in front? That is the question, and now we might feel trouble for Ta. Wow, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, you saw just having to throw everything in there, right? The Bar Barrel, the Snowball, the Lightning, all three spells coming in, and able to get damage, but is he able to get enough damage there? This Snowball is big, good NATO to prevent a disastrous moment.
Yeah, really great on both sides there. High Phoenix here now, so there's no tank, so that means Knight and Hunter can come down to try to get a bit of a counter push, but also means that you're going to give good poison value here to Ta. And now we're basically in a situation where we are in the final couple pushes here. Does Mo decide to go last Goblin Giant? Yes, he does.
Interesting here, and he's in a Snowball trying to get Goblin Giant on tower. I don't think it makes it. He has to defend this one Graveyard, not give up skeleton hits, and I think that's going to be enough. Yeah, wow. Lightning going to be not sufficient. GG, well played. Ta takes game number 1, and lucky for Muhammad Light, he does not have to deal with his most annoying, most toxic deck for the rest of this best of 5 Graveyard. Out for the rest of this one for Ta.
And if I'm Ta, I feel really good about that. You know, I found myself in apparently on paper not the best matchup. Feels like Mo overextended himself maybe once or twice, which is very, very rare for him. But also he had to, right? When you talk about that triple spell aspect that you were pointing out, Rich, you know, there's not a lot of really good ways to break through your opponent's defense other than spending a lot on spells. And while, you know, that worked early on in single elixir, as you get into double and triple elixir, you usually want to start opting for less spell power and more units on the board, and then get those spells in as kind of like the nails in the coffin, or to clean up things that you truly can't get to, like let's say the Ice Wizard in that situation. But the Tombstone Ice Wizard combination with the NATO made it really tough. Again, what Mo talked about, that deck is so defensive. And then when you go back and you actually watch this replay, the defenses for Muhammad Light, he did everything correctly, right? The placements of the Hunters where they needed to be, when they needed to be, the overspend. A lot of times players, when they're new, will be uncomfortable to drop like 9 elixir defensively. Mo did that, but he still could not defend 100% of damage every time.
Yeah, and that, again, Goblin Giant Sparky's going to have a tough time without the cards you mentioned earlier, the Mother Witch, the minions, things like that. Pretty tough call for him here. And I'm looking at the deck choice as well. Look, if Mo wins, he loses 3-4 cards you don't use very often at all, right? The Goblin Giant, the Sparky, the Hunter, and the Phoenix, right? You're not missing much from elsewhere. But also from spell-wise, you're taking out 2 small spells. You're taking out both the Snowball and the Bar Barrel, not to mention the Lightning, which is the least popular, not even counting Rocket, the least popular of the big spells. I'm really curious what the 5-game plan or the 3-deck plan was once you've kind of pigeonholed yourself so much from a spell perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I agreed. When I was looking at those spells, I mean, it makes sense exactly what you're saying about those spells not being the most popular. Even Snowball, right? You know, it has been used more lately just because of more Loon and you know, opting for a different hog option in a dual format. But yeah, I mean, at least in terms of what they were trying to do, it looks like they were almost maybe thinking too far ahead, right? It almost felt like they thought they were only thinking about game 5 instead of maybe just winning in game 4. Who knows? I'm never gonna like speak poorly on the coaching and in the synergy between Mo and Jebba's there, but I will say it was an odd deck, and he got caught looking for it. It was too expensive, too heavy spell-wise, didn't have great ways to break on through the defense there, and it also ran into one of the most defensive decks in the history of Clash Royale. So kind of just a bad combination there for Mo in game number 1, but a great feeling if you're Ta here, right? If you're Ta, you look back to last weekend, you go, look, Kickash did this. I can do this. I picked up game number 1. I believe Kickash picked up game number 1 as well. This can go the distance. And again, I think this dual format really does help you, because when you lose to Mohamed Light, the ability to use cards that you're going to need later on, that is something that is really, really nice to have. And in normal dual mode, you lose that luxury.
You do. And now I'm thinking about the luxuries lost on the side of Ta. Phoenix and Graveyard, not a big concern. Phoenix Graveyard, Ice Wiz, not a big concern. Evo Knight out, Tombstone out.
Yeah.
Bar Barrel, but like, again, this was 2 triple spell decks. Just want to point that out. Quad, if you actually count the Graveyard as a spell, which I still don't count anything that spawns troops as a spell. I'm sorry, I just don't know why. Like, Goblin Barrel's not a spell. It's troops inside of a barrel. I don't know why it's called a spell. But anyway, Bar Barrel, NATO, and Poison all out for Ta. That really limits his options dramatically, just like Mohamed Light playing those, and probably in a worse way, right? Because now you're not really worried about a lot of the minor wall breaker variations. You're able to play Hog, Miner, a lot of things that Mohamed likes with impunity. Poison being gone, so now you're looking at, okay, I'm probably going to face Hog EQ in one of these next matches. I'm going to face something with Fireball one of these next matches. This gives a lot of information for deck picking over to Mohamed Light and Jebbas.
You know, that's actually a really great point that you make about the decks that are no longer available, and maybe why Splash Yard, even if it is strong in the meta, we haven't seen it a lot in dual mode, right? It's not like these players that are playing at the highest level go and play an Ultimate Challenge in the top 100 or look at the leaderboard on Royale API and they go, well, Splash Yard's up there. It really is. It's in the top like 5 decks once again. That version is. But when we talk about dual mode, we really just don't see it a lot. And I think, Rich, you really make a great point there. Some deep level insight of like, there's so much about this deck that is needed in other places. There's so many things about this deck that is imperative in other decks. That Evo Knight and the NATO, more than anything, those need to be in certain places. But you know what? I actually like what Ta's doing here. He goes, nah, no problem. Evo Knight's out. I'm going to run the other recruits version. It's not going to be the one with NATO, obviously. So we're going to see, you know, the spammier version. And then Mohamed Light goes to arrows here. Or, excuse me, not arrows, but I mean, yes, arrows, but archers. And that's another thing of like looking deep into this best of 5, right, Rich? We haven't seen archers at all today and for a while.
Yeah, archers are not around very much. And Mohamed Light running, again, double spell so far, arrows and snowball, and Fisherman as well. And Fisherman's going to have a little bit of trouble with those recruits and the goblins and the wall breakers and the skeleton barrel all on the board. So,
interesting deck composition from Mo in games 1 and in games 2, and does get that wall breaker connection that kills the archer. Really unfortunate interaction there.
Well, there's nothing traditional being played here, and I do have to wonder. I know it's early, it's still the beginning of October, we have a lot of time to cover, but I wonder how much Mo and Jebbas we're going to see interesting different things like this, both from an experimentation standpoint, but also to not expose decks as they are getting closer to World Finals.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because with the evolutions coming in the game, it almost feels like that's a little premature, but also when you look at the decks that are being picked here, Rich, it does look like either navigation or, you know, trying to hide something. I don't know if they're getting that deep, but as of right now, Mo is running some interesting decks, and they are kind of hurting him. You see right there, you know, Todd did a really great job of recognizing, look, your arrows are out of cycle, so I can go really heavy spam on both lanes here, and you're just going to have to pick which one you want to take more damage. Do you deal with the wall breakers, or do you deal with the Dark Goblin? You know, choice is yours. You dealt with the wall breakers. That Dark Goblin got your tower down to 13-14. So Ta in control after picking up game 1 here in game number 2.
And I know I'm calling this about 5,000 years late, but this looks like a 6 loon variation once we have gotten these first 7 cards in.
Yeah, I mean, the Fisherman's kind of weird there to call 6 loon. You know, the other parts of it with the Lumberjack and the Snowball and the recruits make sense. but the fire or the fisherman just a little weird.
Yeah, I mean, this deck in the last day has been played 80 times with a 60% win rate. So it's getting some play. And so far getting some damage onto both sides of Mohamed Light's towers.
Yeah, and Mo here just like, what do I do? You know, can't... Yeah, it's like you can't use the arrows for anything other than the Dart Goblin, but the problem is with the barrel and the wall breakers, that makes it really, really hard to save the arrows for the Dart Goblin. And Todd doing a really good job, as you can see right there. He's giving arrows value to only one unit, right? Only one card. He's not stacking up, you know, wall breakers and goblins and skeleton dragons and Dart Goblins on one side. He's doing exactly what you're supposed to. So now it's Mo's turn to overwhelm.
That's a lot. That's recruits. That's archers. That's the fish boy. Loon behind everything. The ability, will it get out in time? The cause
doesn't get out.
It doesn't.
That's
doesn't.
it. Wow.
Oh boy.
I mean, the options were there, but all of a sudden you just saw that Mo had an ocean of blue on the board, and then that last ditch with the Mighty Miner, you got to play that a couple tiles lower. You can't start him out in the trenches. You need to let him walk up to him just a little bit and then drop that bomb down. As that game went on, you can really see in the numbers here. I mean, honestly, like we were saying, the arrows not getting on top of the Dart Goblins was where Mo started to struggle, but that's because he needed to make sure he didn't take too much damage from the barrel or the wall breaker. You get deeper into double and triple, you can start using those archers more freely for the skeleton barrels. Then the arrows come on top of the Dart Goblin. You have nothing to get on top of that balloon.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you know, we talk again about the sort of the deck choices for these first two decks where guys are trying to play stuff, I guess, that doesn't hamper them too much. And Mohamed Light, look, getting the win with this deck is really big, right? Because as you mentioned, no one plays archers right now, except for some Expo content creators. No one's playing archers right now, right? So not a big concern there. Recruits, fine, you have to play them at some point. Fishboy being gone does mean you're probably not playing Royal Giant, so that does limit some of the choices going forward and gives your opponent some information, but no one's really playing Royal Giant much in competitive right now anyway. It's kind of fallen off in a bad way, so you look at all the stuff being played here, things that are out for Mo now. Probably not playing Ram Rider now with the Lumberjack out. Obviously not playing Lava Loon. Lava Miner is still potentially there for him, so we'll see. But notice he didn't play NATO, so NATO's still available for him. He still didn't play Fireball, didn't play Poison. So gives himself a lot of really simple central meta picks going forward from this game on.
And it's almost like if you're to pull up Royal API and you see the 4 cards on the bottom, the Snowball, the Lumberjack, the Loon, and the Inferno Dragon, those 4 cards find each other a lot in decks. The synergy of those 4 cards together. So if you're going to get rid of one of them, get rid of them all, right? So now it's like what you're talking about. There's a couple decks that you just can't play anymore, but it's okay because in those decks you can't play like Lava Loon and like Ram Spam. They have Inferno usually in both those decks. They have Balloon in obviously the Lava deck. You know, Lumberjack goes in both those decks sometimes. So the idea that you're getting overlapping cards out and overlapping decks, it also still leaves your deck pool pretty big. If that was a little convoluted, trust me, it did make sense. And I do love the deck picking here from Jebez because I think that's really, really important. To go back to your point, Rich, in game number 1, Splash Yard, very good, but then you talk about what it pulls from every other deck out there, and that's where you start to find the trouble.
And Ta gonna go open up Log Mighty Miner. I was gonna think that maybe Ta looks at Loon because of Inferno Dragon and Snowball both being out, but instead gonna go ahead for some Hog Cycle.
And Mo at the bottom of your screen here with Bomb Tower, E-Spirit. E-Spirit really only in Expo and Royal Giant decks, but obviously Mohamed Light and Jebez opting to put it into a minor deck here just for the availability to have Ice Spirit later on, I'm assuming. And to deal with maybe bats. Again, bats are a little bit more popular than they have been, and E-Spirit a great way to do that, deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we saw the Zap earlier, right? Was to contend with bats or other cycle cards, so There you go. And I see someone asking about Snowball twice. Remember, folks, that this is not the normal style of duels. This is the Royale Masters variation of duels. So cards are only gone once you win with them. Nice King Tower activation there. So Mohamed Light lost with Snowball game 1, won with it game 2, and now it's no longer available.
And tries to get a little cheeky there with that NATO. It's nice, though. You see the Elixir advantage is not in anyone's favor, really. Ta's up by technically 1. And that Evo'd Firecracker gets a shot, so a little surprise there. But Mo there, you can see the idea, trying to pull the Goblins away, get his Evo Knight on tower. 23-78, 23-32.
I'm not at all surprised by Mo running NATO Bomb Tower here. You know, you look at what was available for Ta to run, and you had to imagine that he was going to be going to something Miner or Hog at some point, and there you go, seeing the deck that Ta won with in game number 1.
Yeah, and the idea to go with Miner Poison Control with Xe is I do like it, because also, you know, knowing that NATO's out, the Miner is still very impactful, and there's still versions of Hog EQ that can be run by Mohamed Light. So nice decksmanship here from him and Jebas.
And there we go. Does he get on the Evo Firecracker? Doesn't. Good use of the Mighty Miner ability by Ta. And Mo decides to just poison the opposite lane here. And great pre-Earthquake out of Ta. Will he get anything from it? No, the log cleans nicely.
Yeah, I mean, Mo's sitting here going, I have so many ways to stun, stop, pull, hold that Hog Rider, and keep that Firecracker at bay. Maybe I just naked poison. Miners are going to get caught here and there, but I can still send in the miners. But the naked poison, it feels insulting when someone just naked spells your tower and you still lose the game. But Mo recognizing that that's a true option here. Nice catch there on the miner with the Mighty.
Yeah, very nice catch. What he's seen early is that this is probably going to be a game won by spell cycle. So he's beginning the spell cycle early, and that's what we've seen win some key games from some top-tier players, is when they recognize that that's how this game's being decided earlier than their opponent.
Mo doing a good job of not panicking there, sees the Firecracker plus the Hog coming down the lane, leaks a few Elixir to make sure his defense is exactly where he needs it, because the problem with cycling cards when in lieu of leaking Elixir, and that still lines up there, and the Miner, there's nothing there to catch him. Cycling cards in lieu of leaking Elixir when you're going against Firecracker can give your Firecracker lineups and make it more difficult to control. So again, Mohamed Light doing all the correct decision-making here.
And that log play, instead of the NATO play there, sets up this defense. So just really perfect understanding of what was needed to do enough on defense. And Mohamed Light, barring an inexplicable mistake, is going to get the win in game number 3 and take the opportunity for match point.
It's just fascinating how it feels like Mo and Jebas just knew that the stun of that E-Spirit was going to be a necessity in this game. Not that you needed an Ice Spirit stun, but an E-Spirit stun would be just enough, because you know they're saving the Ice Spirit for a reason. And I think, again, that is just a really, really great pull. You run into Hog Rider, the E-Spirit is just enough, coupled with logs and Xes and NATOs and all that. You don't actually need the Ice Spirit, where you will need the Ice Spirit if you want to run the deck that you're seeing on the right-hand side of your screen, which Mohamed Light can just straight up basically run the most popular version of Hog EQ. You take out the Bomb Tower, you put in the Tesla, you take out the Mighty Miner, and you throw in the Knight normally. He can't do that. I'm sure he'd be happy to put in Valkyrie.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And now, looking at the 8 cards that are out for Mohamed Light, because he's now won with both that 6 Loon and this Miner Xe NATO control deck. So now, spell-wise, right? Log, Snowball, 2 key knockback spells are both out. NATO is out, so you have a control spell out. It almost feels like Mo has to run Fireball here just so he has a spell that's disruptive. I'm very curious to see if they run something that doesn't go with Fireball. That would be really, really interesting. And then if that's the case, then what are you using to control? It's either going to be Fireball or potentially going. They can't run Miner Rocket now. Yeah, I mean,
maybe to the skies? Maybe to the skies? I don't know. You don't have Xe, you don't have NATO, you don't have Poison, you don't have Bomb Tower, Arrows, Snowball. Your Lava Hound balloon pushes could become a little bit more intimidating if you're Ta. I think the other part of it, Rich, is that when you look at all those spells being out, oh no, I totally just lost it. I lost, Golem. I was thinking we haven't seen any Golem here today. Fireball would have to be used specifically to take care of the elixir pumps. So then maybe you're able to put it all together. And you know what? But the problem with that is that he doesn't have Lumberjack and NATO. Yeah, exactly. So again, Ta's first deck really kind of hamstringing him here, which is why you go back to Mo. Look, first deck didn't work out. Now he's down 5 spells and Bomb Tower, but he still has great options out there to deal with what's popular. I think if you're Ta right now, you just need to go for the straight exploit game. What does he not have? He doesn't have a lot of good ways to deal with air. I want to see some heavy air stuff. I mean, you could even go as crazy as running something like Lava Clone, Lava Clone, because all these big spells and the Xe, all that are gone. I don't know, but then you have, and Mo doesn't have the ability to run a Remy Ellie type deck.
No.
I guess he doesn't have recruits or knights. So all these things are I mean, this is why I don't envy analysts or coaches, but if I'm Ta and I feel comfortable going to the skies, I do it here. There's so much out for Mohamed Light that deals with that you feel like he kind of has to pick exactly that to counter against.
Yeah, I'm kind of trying now to just take a look at the full depth and breadth and just see what's left. And shout out Royale API. If you guys haven't ever used it yet, and you're someone who goes out and plays competitive, there are 2 features. One, you might be more used to using the feature where you're able to put in the cards that you're interested in being a deck. But there also is the exclude cards option, right? So the ability to go in and say, oh, hey, all of this stuff is not going to be in there. That's pretty impactful here, and I need to get it to actually work correctly as I'm touting the wonders of the exclude cards option. But one of the more interesting things that they did was create that ability for you to exclude cards and see what comes up then. So normally now that we're having a break time here, I'm curious. I don't know if does anyone actually use the exclude cards feature when they're competing out there in chat? Do any of you ever use it?
Yeah, that's interesting.
I've never used it before.
That is interesting. Yeah. Also, I see here in the chat, where is it? It was something, I think that I don't know if it got deleted, but they said, fun fact, both these talking heads wear glasses for no reason. Excuse me, sir. Rich wears those glasses for style, and style is definitely a reason. Me, I'm blind. So no. I don't want to wear these. You will see at World Finals, though, I will probably not be wearing them because they don't like these lights that shine against my glasses, and I'm just a little bit more blind at World Finals. Speaking of blind at World Finals, you realize that Juicy got glasses this year because I swear at World Finals, we were all like, dude, why can't you read that screen? That was like me in 5th grade. I was like, why can't I read the chalkboard from the back of this class? And by chalkboard, I mean whiteboard, because I'm not old.
So maybe Goblin Giant Rage for Mo here, Hoggy Q, Lavaloon, all potential possibilities.
I would love to see him go to Hoggy Q, but obviously that's not going to be it as he plays a Barb Barrel here early on.
Also Mortar.
And he goes Evo'd Mortar. I'm happy.
And, Andrew, I hate to correct you here, but you said I'm wearing these for style. The sun is exceptionally bright in here, and I'm just trying to protect my eyes from long-term sun damage.
Always thinking ahead.
Yes,
my
sir.
Counterpart, Rich Slayton here. Someone asking, what's happening? Why is it taking so long? Well, we're in game now, but I'll tell you right now, it's because we are now deep into this Royale Masters duel format. As you can see, this is not a best of 3. This is a best of 5. So, appropriately so, our players are taking a lot longer to make their decks because this really matters here. Arrows come in to catch that Barb Barrel, plus Ice Spirit gets some decent damage. And then Mo does go to Hog, not Hog EQ, not Hog Super Cycle. He's going to go Hog Mortar with Monk.
And he's going to get a lot of damage from it here. Fireball comes out, but that's still going to be a ton in from the guards.
I mean, that's game, I feel like, already. When you go down that much elixir that early, that messes up your cycle horribly to have to fireball that. The fact that the guards still get damage, this is all rough. And now that's going to retarget Mortar Shot, and Mortar will get back on top of tower. Beautiful stuff there from Mohamed Light. And as quickly as this game started, it feels like it's already wrapped up.
Well, there's certainly some time here as the Mortar makes that feel less impactful, the amount of time that it's available.
And a nice kite here to take that heal spirit, and this is where Mohamed Light is just kind of at his best, is when he's got this big damage lead, and then you start to see him get much more innovative with his defenses, sacrificing tower HP to assert even more dominance on the board.
And Cage can fully counter a Hog Rider by itself, but the kited Hog Rider from that angle, I don't know if it has that same block ability from that position, so that just completely negates the value of the Cage here. And Mo just throwing the fireball out, knowing that it's almost the end of regulation time and he can just get one more fireball on to win this one. And he's confident in this defense. Yeah, that was pretty dominant. Mohamed Light going with a bunch of out there stuff here in these grand finals, getting it done anyway.
I feel like when you look at what happened last week, I think Jebas and Mo both went. I do not want that to happen again. And last week still went really well. They went the distance. They went to game number 5. Mo still almost was the champion, 2 weeks in a row like he does over and over. Big time shout out to Mohamed Light. Congratulations, buddy. You're really making a name for yourself in this scene. But they get to game number 4 here, and Rich, he's just in games 2, 3, and 4. He had great deck picking. He found himself having a lot of things available as he got deeper into this. And I think, again, the best point that you made about this set, Rich, is you go back to that game number 1. Yes, you take out what Mo called his kryptonite, but that deck in and of itself, with the Knight, with the NATO, with the Poison, you find yourself just a little bit hamstrung as you've gone through these next, what could be 4 games.
And what an interesting choice here. You look at this with the bar barrel, you're playing Hog with no log, which I'm not sure Ta thought was a likely option. But notice that the pick of the Phoenix here, right? So the Fireball is able to focus on the Hogs, and then this is a fireball bait. You have so many targets, but you have the Mortar able to think more about the Barbs and the Zappies, the Fireball able to work on the Hogs, and then the Phoenix able to deal with the with the Fly Machine. Just really nice. And I'm going to guess that this is what Mo and Jebas were putting Ta on here for game 4.
Well, the other part of it, too, is you look at what's there to pick up the Mortar, right? We saw Mo really abuse the fact that the Barbs and the Cage were going to be out of cycle, so you have to drop Zappies. You never want to drop Zappies on a Mortar because they do the worst thing, the retarget. The retarget plus the low HP, right? A lot of times you'll see people drop their unit after the Mortar already locks on top of tower. Even with an E-Wiz, it's a little bit better. But the problem is with the Zappies, you get that one shot in the bar barrel in, and that's just 4 elixir out the window. So really, really well done there by Mo and Jebas. We've sung their praises for a long, long time. Let's take a look at the run that Mo went on to get to the gold here. It took him 2 weeks to do it, but he was still able to get to the top.
Yep, the final run here, Mohamed Light starting off against Agony King with a clean 2-0. Trainer Adnan, against Broken 2-0 again. It took him until the grand final to actually drop a game. Lost game 1 against Ta, but the comeback kid does it one more time. 1, 2, 3 in a row to take the dub and be our second qualifier champion. Earn a bunch of cash and a bunch of points.
Yeah, and I think if I'm not mistaken, we saw that Mo went 10-0 yesterday in qualifiers. So like you said, Rich, all the way from qualifiers to finals, and he only dropped 1 game. That is why he is the goated one. So him and Kickash, congratulations to both of you guys. Kickash was able to take that set over Mo. Ta able to show up today and get a big, strong second place showing. And here's our leaderboard so far. Rich, Ta, you got a lot out of today.
Got a lot out of today, indeed. A big jump up the leaderboard. And you mentioned Clown was playing in the Superverse event yesterday, so not able to compete in the qualifiers for this event yesterday. Was a little bit busy, but my expectations will see him back in our next qualifier. Trainer Adnan getting on the board here as well. Sandbox with a nice jump, but you see 9 players on the heels of both Sandbox and Igor with a lot more Clash Royale to be played.
Yeah, and you can see there Mohamed Light, really the only one that feels completely locked in with a massive lead over everyone else. Yeah, not being a part of that Samsung Galaxy. Oh, congratulations to you. Great job casting, man. I saw you doing the tri-game casting, and it's all in the Supercell family, so we love to promote it. We love to talk about it. I know that was not easy. You talk about how many, like, not even 10,000 hours, like 20,000+ hours now we put into CR, and being able to show up and do it in other games. Really impressive. But yeah, for someone like Clown, he was there yesterday, couldn't be here today. Mo was not there yesterday. He was able to show up and win here today. And remember, Royale Masters is not done. We have one more King of the Hill event this next month. It's going to be a little earlier in the month. I think it's mid-October as opposed to usually the last week of said month. So make sure to look out for that. And of course, Rich, we got one more qualifier, one more last chance qualifier, and of course, our finals here for Royale Masters. How can we get involved, Rich? I want to play in this.
Well, first of all, look at the socials right below me. See my name? Go past my name. Go down to where you see the Discord, the YouTube, the Twitter, the Instagram logos, all there, /RoyaleMSTRS. Also in the YouTube description below, if you're watching and you came here in-game or just found us on YouTube, discord.gg/RoyaleMasters. Places where you can get involved. Of course, there's still plenty of time to compete, plenty of time to qualify, plenty of time to make some money, and make sure you're ready for all the future stuff that happens in Royale Masters, because we're not done yet.
Not yet. Not even close. We will not be on next week for those that need a week off. No problem. You get a little bit of a break, but we'll be right back after that for more Royale Masters. Rich, send us home. It's Sunday. I need to eat. I want to watch some football.
Hey, I hope you get, is your fantasy team lineup all set up? I hope you're going to do well. For everybody here, for the squad in the booth over at Royale Masters, making a great competition, my buddy Andrew Guy, I'm Rich Slayton. We'll see you back here next time for more Royale Masters.